Hello, Professor. Good to see you.
Hello, and good to see you. Now you hear me. Shall we just right away check the technique?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Should I invite them to enter?
Yeah, well, first thing is I hear you from the computer speakers, and I don't like that. Let me see.
Battery 70%.
Say something.
Yeah, I'm here. But we hear you very well. We hear you very well.
Yeah, you hear me, but I hear you from the computer, which is okay, but I would like to hear through the speakers.
From the speakers, are they connected?
Yes, a bit by cable, but
Okay,
it's
go to the, you know how to do it? You have to go to the, to my
Einstellungen.
test speakers and microphone.
Ja, Geräte, Bluetooth and other Geräte. And it is.
You have to choose it.
Yeah, it is chosen. Let's try it again. Yeah, but nothing happens, huh? Yeah. Okay, well, this is not too bad. I can hear you and I'm alone here, so this is not disturbing. I can listen, and most of the time I will speak anyway. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but then maybe sharing the screen.
Yeah, I'll do that right away. Just a moment. I'm doing, let's do. Yeah, now I give you sharing screen.
Okay. What is that? I mean,
It's under, you go under share screen and you click and then you can, or double click on it, share screen.
Yeah, I see it. But when I do that, I don't see you. Oh, yeah, I see you that way. Perfect. And if I make full screen.
Yeah, you can make full screen as you wish.
Yeah, and then I see you there. That's all perfect. I mean, we are set, huh?
yeah, we are set. Yeah, now we're just.
So, and you can hear me well, so I don't need a headset, right?
Yeah, we hear you very well. I'm taking now a screenshot for the program.
Okay. Good. So then we just wait for the participants.
Yes.
And I give myself a D. I just announced that I'm sort of sick. And this morning I had a horrible voice. At the moment it works. And I have Camille tea prepared, 1 liter. So sometimes we will have an additional pee break when I drink too much of it.
That's no problem, Professor. That's no problem. Alles good.
Yeah.
We are waiting. We have 31 participants, so we are only now 7. So we need to wait for everyone to come in.
So
we'll check how many people registered for it. So
yeah. And have you seen my email regarding Grillhof?
Yeah, I seen it. I think it's good. I saw a little bit about it because I was out of.
Well, it's not good because we cannot go on in the time that we planned.
Yeah.
So we have to do. I don't know how urgent or when we have to go. Maybe May would be even more beautiful, but I don't know whether it's too late.
Yeah, we can do February as well. If you don't mind February, I can tell the team and we can do February. We can ask them for February.
Yeah, well, but probably we will.
I think it's nice in February. We see the snow, right?
Well, that's a question of perspective.
Yeah.
Maybe for somebody who comes from the desert, this is beautiful.
Exactly.
Since I am a Tyrolean, I can tell you in our understanding that May is the most beautiful month of the year. But I understand that we have different perspectives.
Yeah. We have snow one time in the year, and it's very cold. We don't go out. We play with it 5 minutes and we go in. That's our snow time.
Yeah, okay.
So to see mountains with snow and the Alps, this will be so beautiful. Because I came before to your place actually to meet you, but you were not here.
Yeah, but maybe we discuss that on Wednesday with Professor Leiner and Wemke, and then I will let them know.
Yeah, I think it's.
Or do you think shall I at least tentatively reserve the rooms because it's the only week that they have free until the beginning of May?
Yeah, because in May we go to Algeria maybe or something like that. It's much better.
We means all of us?
Yeah.
Me too.
Yes, of course. You are very
Uh-huh.
important. You are part of the one of the pillars, Professor.
Okay. I didn't perceive myself so far.
No, you are. You are
Okay.
one of the
Yeah,
pillars.
so let's discuss that on Wednesday, and then we propose and make a decision. And
Yeah,
I will maybe yeah, maybe during the break today, I will try to call the director and reserve tentatively.
yeah. And I will send to everyone in the team to tell them about it.
Okay, great.
So we're still
Good.
waiting for people to come in because we have a lot of about 31 will join. So let's give them. I don't know what time is it right now. Maybe we should have started like 15 minutes before until they come. We'll give them 5 minutes. Actually, what do you think, Professor? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
well, yeah. You tell me when I shall start. Are you going to introduce me, or shall I just start right away?
Yeah, I would introduce you, and then you can introduce yourself.
That's very friendly.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I will introduce you, and then you can introduce yourself more. And,
Okay,
and
good.
then,
What I understand now is that I have here the clock in my living room, so I probably will take it out because otherwise we get the bells all 50 minutes. Just a moment.
there's a man sending. I'm checking that some people want the code. Let me check if everyone has the code. Just a moment. Where is it?
Okay.
Yeah, some people cannot join. They need to register. I will tell them. Just a moment. Let me check again. Yeah, here is another person. So people are entering. So just a moment. So waiting for more people to come in. They're trying to go in. So maybe I'll send them the code as well in just a moment. So, did you stop screen sharing or are you still screen sharing?
I do.
Because for one reason, I can't see. Ah, here's it. I need to
Okay.
switch you with the screen sharing. Yeah, now it's okay. So we are now
Okay.
13. Do we need to start or we will? Some students cannot enter. Let me see. Yeah. So click join. We're still taking people in, so I will. I'll give them another 4 minutes. Professor, is that okay with you?
Yeah, I wait until you get me started, and then you tell me when we will make a break. Yeah, I think according to the stuff.
Okay. When do you like to do a break? So it's 3 hours. So we have 1 hour and a half and 1 hour and a half. What do you think, Professor? Maybe we do that. What's
Well,
good for you?
Well, I think if we do twice 90 minutes, we don't have a break. So probably we will have take a break 10 minutes of each side, means
Yeah.
20 minutes break.
Okay.
So then we would normally go until 15:20, huh?
Okay.
And then 20 minutes break, and then we do the rest.
Okay. Let me write it down so I
But
can.
I'm flexible. You just tell me.
I think that's good. That's good for us.
Okay.
So you want me? Do you want me to? So.
You know, I mean, I have a very bad reputation as a marathon teacher, so I can also go until midnight.
That's excellent. Yeah, but we want them as well to learn more, and they're still new in the subject, so we hope everything will be good. So
I guess some students have families and other things to do, so we should finish in time. Yeah.
yeah, okay. So you want when now we start? So you want the break on 15:20, the first
I
break
would say if we start now, I would say yes.
for 10 minutes.
Approximately, yeah. So maybe also I will see where I am, and you let me finish the argument, and then we go into break.
Oh, that's a shame, Professor. For me, I would love you to stay speaking because you are what I'm writing about. So to me, I have to stay here and listen to you for another 3 hours. I have no problem.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. We are starting in like another 2 minutes, 3 minutes to give some chance for people to enter actually. So we have quite good people. We have 15. I don't know how much. 21 registered, so we are in good position. So we are missing only 34 people registered. So we have 34. So I don't know. We have now about if we get to 20, we can start, I guess, because it's enough. I'm giving more time, another 2 minutes for people to try to come in. So our total is 35 participants in this course. And this, I will start like in a bit. Yeah, once we get 20, we're now 17, and I think if we get 20, we can start. So then, as you see, we have people from all around the world, by the way, not just from one place or two places.
I cannot see. I see only two participants and you.
That's good if you see. You can actually maneuver and see them all. Go to view. You have a view, and then
but then I have to leave the presentation. Yes. No. It's okay. Maybe we use the time for that. I just wanted to discuss that with you. If people want to say something and put it right into chat, maybe you stop me and tell me.
Okay. So you want, if someone has a question, I can stop you and ask you a question.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, just tell me somebody has a question, and then the person shall ask the question. Or it's not only questions; it can also be statements, observations. Usually, I tell my students, tomatoes, everything is welcome.
That's excellent. Very good. So I'm still here waiting for some people to come because we are 35, so we're missing about 15 people.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and we're 18, so we have 18 in. So if we get another 2, I guess is enough for us. Or just I'll give time. Yeah, it's 10. So once this 2 minutes, we can give them 5 minutes, I guess. No, 2 minutes, I guess, is maximum, and then we can start. Because I'm still getting people that are coming in.
So deal 2 minutes or 2 people.
I don't. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 2 people. we have a lot of people to wait for. So no, we don't wait for them all. We gave them 10 minutes is more than enough, actually. So some people are having problems entering, so that's why I'm just helping them to enter. So, sorry, let me. So I think it's enough. I think, Professor, let's start. What do you think?
Okay.
Oh, we have another person just coming in. Yeah. We have many, yeah, they start coming in again. So, okay. Since we passed, okay, we'll give them 3 minutes or 3 minutes extra, and that's it. It'll be 15 minutes, and then we go in. We go in. I'm sorry to take more of the time. Maybe we should let them come next time 10 minutes before.
Or they have to stay 10 minutes longer.
Exactly. For me, I would do a coffee.
Yeah.
By the
always
way-
always keep the break. That's also an option.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very important option. That's why I asked you before. So we are
Yeah.
now. Yeah, we're 19. I'm looking at the time. Okay, we'll give another. This 2 minutes, still not over. 1 minute is over. We have 2 minutes still. Is there anything you like to? So the break will be on 15:20, and then we have 1 hour, and then there's no need to another break, right? Because you can finish it
No.
and that's it. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how long is the
No.
break? You wanted 15 minutes, the break?
Yeah, probably because we now left already a lot of time. So let's do 10 to 15 minutes break. Yeah.
Okay.
I
I still
mean,
get, yeah, because I'm still getting people are coming in. Yeah, I gave them 2 minutes, so I have 1 minute, 2 minutes, and then we can start. So yeah, we can cut not the break. So 15 minutes for the break or 10 minutes for a break. What do you think?
yeah, we will see when we are there. Huh?
Exactly. That's yeah. And if the people want to break. So I'm starting at 2:15 actually because it's much better. So you need
It's
like
academic.
yeah, 2:15 is good. So we will be in a good position in timing and everything. And we'll give the chance for other people to come in as well. You have only now 1 minute left, I guess. So for people to come in, and then we start. Yeah, 1 minute is left. I give them 15 minutes is more than enough, I guess. What do you think, Professor? I think.
Absolutely. It's very academic. Yeah.
Thank you.
Academic and culturally sensitive.
Yeah, exactly. We are in Germany, but we are trying to be more culture sensitive to the people that are coming in. Since it's online and we have a lot of people from different places, so I think it's really that's hard for them. No, still it's 14. So once it's 14:15, we can start. And I can introduce you, and then you can introduce yourself, and then Professor, you can start, and the floor will be yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need to introduce the students because they're like students and professors in the meeting. So some people you know them, some people you don't know them. So the professors you would know, but the that are with us in the AARMENA project, but the students are the PhD students who wants to attend the PhD program. So someone I think someone was very upset because he couldn't enter, sending me messages, but I'm trying to help them before. Okay, it's 14:15. I think it's culture sensitive was okay. So now we can start. I would like to tell you that this is a part of the Erasmus Plus project for capacity building program for the higher education institution in the Middle East and North Africa for reconciliation, conflict transformation, and peace studies, AARMENA. This project is co-funded by the Erasmus Plus of the European Union and the course is about developing skills on reconciliation and peace studies. And at this phase, it will start with Professor Dr. Wolfgang Dietrich. He's a professor of peace studies at the University of Innsbruck and also the UNESCO Chair for Peace. We are very honored to have him and to give us this seminar that is going to be like a very fruitful seminar for the project and as well for the PhD students who has been accepted to the PhD program and who are also trying to submit their proposals after this seminar. The seminar is taking place from today, the start of today, until the 12th of January. So it's going to be once a week, and it's on the same time. Different professors will be giving it. Professor Wolfgang will start, and then we have Professor Leiner and me, myself, will give a seminar session, and then we have Professor Vermeck as well from the education at the University of Vienna. So thank you everyone for attending, and now I give the floor, the seminar for our Professor Wolfgang Dietrich. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ayat. Welcome, everybody. I actually can only see 2 of you, but I heard that there are more than 20. Yeah, let us first talk about the procedure, which is just if you want to interrupt me, I warn you, I talk like a machine gun. So if you want to interrupt me because you want to ask something, you want to add something, you want to contradict, you want to throw tomatoes or something like that, you are welcome. And technically we do it the way that you just write into the chat and Dr. Ayat will stop me after I finish the sentence or whatsoever, because I cannot see it simultaneously with the slides on the screen, on the shared screen. So I think that's it. And well, I guess since I will give most of the classes now in this semester, probably and gradually we are going to know each other. And yeah, I hope that we will have a very rich discussion. I hope that these lectures and the content that I give them make sense. It is, of course, harmonized with Professor Leiner, Professor Ayat, and Professor Wernke. So I hope that the whole package makes sense for you and that you will benefit from what we are doing here together. Correct. Yeah, thank you for introducing me and welcoming me. Just one very slight correction. I am not professor for peace studies at the university anymore for some few days. I have been because I retired recently. I still am UNESCO chairholder and in this function cooperating and working with the University of Vienna and in this AARMENA project. But just for being really on the totally updated and correct with who I am in my function. Yeah, so the main title is The History and Philosophical Foundations of Reconciliation and Peace Studies. Now the reconciliation part will be done by the experts in that. Yeah, our cooperation is exactly that Jena comes from this reconciliation expertise and specialization that the university has there, and Innsbruck is famous and outstanding in the world of peace studies. And I've been invited because I can introduce you, and I hope that we together will be able to see where the connections, where the overlapping parts are, and of course also in which sense these disciplines differ. So this is at least the first part of this whole lecture that we try to explore now in the first session, peace and conflict studies as a transdiscipline, and of course then later on in the continuation its relation to reconciliation studies. I think that reconciliation studies is more familiar to most of the participants, if I'm informed well, and maybe peace studies is sort of an not that well known terrain. So I will give sort of an introduction. And since I mentioned here, well, this first title, the title of the first lecture, Peace and Conflict Studies as a Transdiscipline, well, this is what we are going to discuss now. So, and the first question, if we do so, is I hope that I caught your attention already with one of the words in the title. Peace and conflict studies is clear, that's what we are talking about. But why and what is a transdiscipline, and why do we need that in and for peace studies specifically? This is, of course, not only for peace studies, but our topic is peace studies. So why is peace studies a transdiscipline? What does this mean? And what are the consequences for our further work? Since I know that many of you are active in the AARMENA network, and we are doing currently this project on development of curricula in peace and reconciliation studies, I think here are very important basic understandings of what we are doing, and from the substance, from the content that we are discussing in this transdiscipline, very important, the didactical consequences. A transdiscipline cannot be taught the same way as a discipline. And this has to be discussed, and I try to elaborate that now in the next minutes. So what is a transdiscipline, and where does this word come from at all? And when I tell you, when I go into that and try to answer this question, I have first to introduce you to one of my personal heroes. And I guess he's not only my personal hero, but he's probably the hero, or at least one of the heroes of everybody who is busy with peace studies, a person that you definitely have to know. His name is Adam Curl, and he lived quite long, from 1916 to 2006. I had the honor to be at the University of Bradford in 2016 when we celebrated there his 100th birthday, of course, when he was not there with us anymore, but his daughter, and all his famous disciplines. So these are names. I don't want to go into name dropping, but if you read peace studies, or if you do peace studies, you have to know names like, most of all, Jean-Paul Leverach, probably the most important current peace researcher. He's a disciple of Adam Curl. Dom Woodhouse, Jenny Pierce. So, and I could continue. I don't want to make a long list, but these are really the big names of contemporary peace studies. They are almost all disciples of Adam Curl. So he's like, I don't want to use this word father of peace studies, because there's somebody else who carries this name and who is still alive. This is Johann Galtung. We will talk about him later. But Adam Curl was, just very briefly, his CV, he was the first ordinary professor for peace studies on the European continent. And this is very relevant for our topic, the history of peace studies. So he became professor for peace and conflict studies at the University of Bradford in England in 1973. So that's a very important date for our discipline, because until then, peace studies did exist before, also in Europe, but until then, there was not one single European university where peace studies was established as an ordinary discipline. And if you study the map of peace studies institutionally in Europe, you will see that still there are not too many. So for example, in Germany, it's 7, in Austria, it's 1, mine, in England, a few more, in Scandinavia, some, and also some in Spain, and that's more or less it. The rest is really very, very singular. So this is not mainstream. We are not yet, even in 2021, we don't talk about the academic mainstream when we talk about peace studies, but we rather talk about a niche and a discipline that still struggles for getting a clear shape, a clear logic, an identity, and a method, of course. This is what we are now talking about. And this is extremely difficult. And here I come back to this transdiscipline thing, because if we understand peace studies in the sense of Adam Curl, we automatically create resistance of neighboring disciplines. So the most frequent conflict that you find with peace and conflict studies is with political science. But it's not the only one, there are more. Sociology, yeah, I don't want to go through all the disciplines, but it is obvious that the very existence of peace studies creates skepticism on universities. So why? Let's go into that, into this proposal that Adam Curl, who was the first professor, as I said, and he immediately began to develop a methodology and an identity of peace studies as an academic discipline very clearly in order to make it survive, because otherwise he would have had a nice job and then it's over. So for his background, again, he was by formation an anthropologist. He was, before he became professor for peace studies in Bradford, he was a professor at Oxford University in England, at Harvard University in the US, so quite prominent places. And so he had a backing when he went there. Important was also, and here this is important for peace studies all the time, maybe in a different way now for most of the people in the audience, he was in his religious confession a Quaker. So that means this is one of the smaller Christian so-called traditional peace churches that are very prominent in northern England and in parts of the US. And they have as a very principle, as a spiritual principle, nonviolence. So of course, this background qualifies an academic for an academic discipline, peace studies, which is not a religious endeavor, but still your attitude as a person is important, how you execute your job. So this is the one thing. The other thing is that very early in his life, he got into contact with Tantric Buddhism, and he was very fascinated by that. He came close to the Dalai Lama and to other leaders, and a lot of the philosophy that he took into the field came from there. So a quite interesting mix, a Buddhist Christian minority approach made by a trained anthropologist. And the next thing that is important in his CV is that during the Second World War, he served as a soldier in the British Army, and he became responsible for the treatment of war trauma, especially for returning war prisoners. So maybe mostly prisoners who were in the camps of the Nazis in Germany. When they returned home, many of them came into his hands, which made him sort of a psychologist without ever having been a trained psychologist. But this was very important for him in his personal life experience. Now, so from all that background that I just told you, he started academically to define the epistemological difference between peace studies as he understood and experienced it as an academic discipline and method on the one side, and international relations and political science as academic fields on the other. So the first thing that he made clear is peace studies is not political science. Peace studies is not international relations, wherever international relations is a discipline on its own rights. In many universities, international relations is just a part of political science, depending on the organizational structure. And you can imagine if you start a new project with this understanding that the ones who are established in international relations and political science perceive competition. Oh, here comes somebody who intervenes into our affairs and wants to do things differently. So you cannot expect to have friends when you do that. And this is a repeated experience of peace studies around the world. This is not a European thing. What was that? Was this for me? No.
Someone by mistake opened his
yeah, maybe just by mistake. Okay, so that's the main point. So transdiscipline now means, in his understanding, the use of various methods and insights of central academic disciplines. So in 73, when he proposed that, he highlighted the importance of proved and tested insights of at least political science, psychology, and anthropology. And he called that a transdisciplinary approach to peace studies. So this is where from where this transdiscipline thing comes. And if you have only three, which is quite different ones, for example, in our university here in Innsbruck, each of these disciplines is in a different department. So that means we understand it as completely different branches of science. Now uniting that in one is of course a challenge. And the point is that you cannot only say, okay, the methodological canon of political science, sorry, I see here in the typo, of political science, plus the methodological canon of psychology and of anthropology, because you need personnel who can combine that in their own mind. So you need people who get trained in the three of them, which is of course much more challenging than just studying one thing and being good in one discipline. And in a way, you need a general understanding of all of them. And you have to be able, because this is another principle of Adam Curl, you have to be able to apply that in practice. So peace studies is not just a philosophy in the ivory tower. It's not that you find nice words to say that everybody should be peaceful and we will have paradise on earth. This is not peace studies. This is dreaming. Yeah. So peace studies is very hands-on. It means you go into the mud, you go into the places where it hurts. You are present in the hot conflict zones of the world. This is our understanding, for example, in Innsbruck. Our whole curriculum is built to train academic personnel for international peace operations, civilian, of course. So how do you get people there? They have to be physically fit. They have to be fit in all their psychological aspects. They have to have knowledge. They have to know methodological things, and yeah. So this is what became more and more. So in the 50 years since Adam Curl wrote that, we have more or less the whole list of disciplines that you know that are relevant for peace studies. For example, I personally am very fascinated at the moment in languages in peace studies. So how does our understanding of peace change by the use of different grammars? Yeah, this sounds a little bit, I don't know, stranger for the beginning, but very soon when you go into the practical field, you see how important it is how you talk. And this is, I don't talk about languages. How many languages do you speak? Well, of course, that's also fine if you speak many languages, but I mean also your first language. Your first language has a grammar, and the grammar frames your mind. And this frame defines how you perceive and interpret peace. And this is not only true for you here who do peace studies, but this is also true for the parties that you will meet in the conflict. So you better know how they speak in order to know how they think, in order to know how they perceive peace and what they want. And here we are already on one of the headlines of the main topics of international politics, because I guess that since many of you are from the Middle East and North Africa, you know precisely what I mean when I say this is one of the main problems of United Nations, that we have a lot of experts who are really well trained, and a lot of them are very honest professionals, but this understanding for other cultures, for the mindset of other people, is very hard to be transported in an organization like the UN. And the same is true for big NGOs like Doctors Without Borders or Caritas, or what else do you want? Red Crescent, or yeah, well, all these Oxfam and what the names might be. So this is very difficult, and we know by evaluating peace operations that very often the failure cannot be found only in the objective challenge of the task, of the job, but very often it comes from these misconstructions, misunderstandings in language. So just for giving you one example that you see, well, I think this is quite understandable. So we would have to say political science, psychology, anthropology, and languages. But what about law? But what about philosophy? What about theology and religion? What about sociology and so on? So you see all of them have relevant knowledge and methodologies, and they have to be known. And this is impossible for one single person to master that all. So therefore, we have to understand that the discipline is that big, the transdiscipline is that big, and within that we can focus on the one or the other aspect. This is a personal choice, and then you go with that. And we cannot do what happens quite often in other disciplines, to say, well, okay, this is not the scientific approach of our discipline. I personally, I studied 3 different disciplines, and I can hear very well the historians when I came to them telling me, but this is political science. Yeah, it's true, but I studied both. Yeah, so this and I think most people who go with peace studies know this challenge. So, but he stated that, and I think that he made a very important point. And since that time, we understand peace studies as a transdiscipline and not as another one separated discipline. So why? Because here I quote him, and I just read the quote. Well, fairly early in my experience as a mediator, I began to be aware that the leaders who have to make momentous political and strategic decisions are not simply icy thinking machines. Oh. On the contrary, however able they may be, their judgments are also affected by their fears, anger, resentment, ambition, vanity, and by the largely unconscious memory of long past pains, ancientness, and feelings of powerlessness. So I don't know whether the Secret Service follows us here, whatever Secret Service or for whatever country. If so, I think they will be very bored, because this is so clear to everybody who works in a Secret Service or in an army, that they don't see the point. Why do we have to mention that? Well, in peace studies, and I would say generally in civilian academics, this is an important point, because we tend to forget that. Again, come to language. If I tell you that I don't know, Morocco is very angry about the last decisions of Algeria, what do I say? Well, I convert actors, human actors, into abstract criteria, as if nation states were feeling animals, beasts whatsoever, and interpret it that way. And if you look at the history books, they are full with sentences like that. Now, what Curl says, since he works with real people, even if these people are very powerful, he saw with his psychological experience, with his anthropological training, with his political scientist's experience, and so on, that even the most powerful are driven by fears, hopes, well, whatever, vanities, and so on, what you see here, in their decisions. And it is worse, if you want to do peace studies, that you analyze these characteristics of the leaders or of the people in power in general, and don't confuse them with turning wheels in machines. They are not. So they are human beings. And therefore, if you want to negotiate with them, and if you want to mediate, what you have to be able is to be able to read the conditions and the reactions of the other person. So this is absolutely nothing scandalous now. You will find that in all coach trainings, or even for business leadership and things like that, you will be told that. And of course, this also has to do with yourself. meaning, for example, depending on the context, how do you dress, how do you greet people, how do you address people, and well, what does it mean if you go into a certain body language, how do they read you, and so on. So all of that is normal in high politics nowadays, that the head of states or the high-ranking politicians, when they travel to other countries for negotiations, all of them get prepared by secret services for in this respect. That's totally normal. Now, since we in peace studies don't train future ministers, at least this is not the aim of the study, ministers or head of states or diplomats, there are schools for them, we do not train them in the sense of how to manipulate, but we have to know the same things in order to be able to read situations and to use this knowledge for the mediation process that we are usually responsible for. So that's an important point. In the 1970s, this was absolutely revolutionary. Nowadays, we know it, but I have my doubts that it is really integrated into the curricula of so many peace studies programs around the world. Yeah, and there are different reasons why. One is that maybe there is not the awareness. That's a point why I mentioned that here. The other is, of course, that you can only well, you can write whatever curriculum you want, but in the end you have to do it. And if you don't have the personnel for all these aspects, you cannot do your program. So therefore, there are different practical reasons behind that. But the point, I think, is extremely important. So, and then the next question that is very relevant for our students is, what about you, the students, as a girl called the students would-be peace workers, meaning with would-be future peace workers, those who are not yet because they are in training, but they want to become peace workers. So, and what he said about them, that means now, if you are a student who listens, you as the student, or if you are a professor who listens in this moment to me, then for your students that you teach, anyone such as a conciliator who tries to influence a relationship becomes in some degree part of that system. To pretend that he or she is an impersonal outside observer is dishonest. Look at that word, dishonest. It is better to say as openly as possible what he did and how he felt. Now, he and she, of course, this is 70s. So what does that mean? That means that if you want to be a peace worker, be ready to become part of the conflict. If you want to be a peace worker, be prepared to become part of the conflict. So there is no comfortable or comfort zone outside of the conflict from where you can intervene without being touched, without being involved. That's very different to the mainstream and conventional schools that analyze, you know, I mean, we have in Cartesian science, we have the separation of perceiving subject and perceived object. And the conflict in peace and conflict studies then is understood as the object that we study, and we try to be as neutral and distanced as possible. Now, Adam Curl, the first professor of peace studies in Europe, says impossible. You cannot be separated from the conflict that you work with. So as soon as you are working with a conflict as a mediator, you are part of it. Your very presence, even if you don't speak, if you don't do anything, your very presence already changes the conflict. And we know that, of course, from practical applied work, taken the frame of the UN since 1992, all the famous observer missions. So what is, we send lightly or just for self-defense armed soldiers into conflict zones, into zones of separation of the parties, and they serve there as observers. So being there and just reporting this and that happened, this or that groups of people, whatever, are moving in this zone, that already changes the reality. And we know that also from the very personal, private context. For example, if you look at, I guess that all of you live in families in a way. So if two children are fighting and you just enter the room and look, they immediately change their behavior. Yeah, maybe they don't stop fighting, but maybe they will fight differently, or they will blame each other and they will scold and whatsoever. So that means just the presence of an observer is already a change. And now imagine you do actively something. You really intervene with a plan into the affairs, into the relations of the conflicting parties. If you do that, you are part of the conflict. And doing that, becoming part of a conflict of others, requires a conscious decision that you make clearly. And when you make this decision, you better be prepared. And here we are back to peace studies. That means in all kinds of international missions, civilian or military, before you go, you get hopefully a proper pre-deployment training. But the pre-deployment training is usually just the facts, the hardcore facts and that you need for operating in the respective zone. This is not like a basic training. Peace studies should give this basic training. That means the formation of the peace worker who is able to consciously switch from a private mode into a professional mode has to be done in peace studies. And now we are back again. Why do we need psychology? It's not only for our contact, our interaction with the parties, but it is most of all for preparing ourselves. So psychological tools help us to read ourselves, to prepare ourselves, and to know what we are able to and what we are not. Let me compare that simply for this is a popular thing, let's say with soccer. Yeah, a soccer player has to know what he or she is good for. So if you are trained as a goalkeeper, you will probably not play on the position of a defender or of I don't know, a center field player or whatever. But the best use for you is the goal. And all the others, of course, the same logic. So what you are doing is throughout your career that you first get trained, because obviously you have some characteristics that make you good for that. Yeah, so maybe you are tall and you can jump and blah blah blah. And then you have to refine your qualities constantly. Even if you're, let's say, a soccer player is 30, by stopping refining the qualities, by stopping training, immediately the person will be out of the team and cannot be a professional player anymore. Yeah, so that means this is important. And now as an example, as a metaphor in sports, but it is exactly the same in peace studies. So a peace worker who maybe carries one day a degree of a Master of Arts in Peace Studies or whatever, a PhD in Peace Studies, has to be trained in these concepts and has to get ready personally. I see the hand. Yes, just a second. What is important here is that, well, what I want to stress is, according to my experience of 35 years in the field, is that most students, when they come to the programs, they are in their mid-20s usually. It is astonishing how little they know about themselves. And if you give them a frame where they can explore themselves and make that part of the study, you do a very good thing to them, because that makes them ready for the pre-deployment training before they go really to deployment. So I stop here and wait for the statement that obviously is wants to be made.
It's in the chat, Professor. A question from Salim.
Yeah, but I don't see the chat.
Okay, the political decision. I will read it.
Yeah, please.
The political decision is work group of some constitutions in the state. How we use the psychological search tools to study the peace building operations. So he's stating that how do you get psychology integrated within the political decisions or developing a peace building
I got it. Yeah, this is already, well, that is a big question. Well, I would like to start from the logic. Let me, since I'm Austrian, you know, Austria is a neutral country, and we do our peace operations strictly in the frame of the UN. So we don't participate in anything outside of the UN. And this is already an important point. If you look at the UN way to prepare missions, I make that brief because otherwise we are done for the rest of the day. So what happens is you need a decision of the Security Council, which is difficult enough. If you get the decision, yes, we want to send troops, or maybe most of the time today, the civilian military cooperation. So we send personnel, then the Secretary General has to organize the mission. That's one of the main jobs that he has to do. And how does he do that? Since the UN don't have troops and don't have civilian personnel that they just can send, and they don't have budget, he has to send letters and invitations to all the governments of the participating states, that means of the world, and ask them, well, we want to do a mission there and there, and we need, I don't know, that many soldiers, that many civilian experts, I don't know, police people, technicians, health workers, and so on. And well, who would like to provide either personnel or material or pay for the costs and so on. So that's a quite long procedure. And now I come to the answer of the question. When this reaches the nation state, it is usually not usually, it's the government of the state, whatever structure you have in the state, and correct what the person who asked said, is that then they have to act according to the constitution of the single nation state. And this is different in different countries. Now, the procedure is usually, if I go from a democratic state, it is that the prime minister, or however the position is called, receives that, has to discuss it with government, and then usually gives to the ministers of the different departments the order, well, organize that if we want. And in the meantime, we send a letter to New York and tell them, yes, we participate with this or that. What you need in a democracy is then a decision of the parliament, and then you need the people. And here we go. This is now the really important point regarding this question. There are states that can easily say, because of the legal frame of the national constitution, okay, we send, I don't know, 5,000 or 10,000 soldiers right away. And that means that the Minister of Defense gets the order, you organize that and that contingent, and you send them. That works in some states. And these are the states that send the most personnel to UN missions. But in other states, you cannot do that. It's against the law. This is exactly the question. In other states, after the decision of the parliament, what you need is that the ministers have to do a call and invite the experts that they want to send to apply, then evaluate whether these people are qualified. And if so, then they get the famous pre-deployment training, and only then they go. The main difference between these two extreme models is that these people who, of the second case, they will get paid very well. Why? Because usually these are professionals, many of them civil servants, already in the home country, so they have their salary, and they get, because they go on the mission, an additional payment for the mission. So that means that is attractive, and therefore you also get really very high qualified, let's say in the military context, you get officers and really the best qualified ones. But in other countries, when you just can say it is an order and you go, then you send thousands of recruits. That means they are less qualified, and they get the same that they would get at home while they are trained in the whatever barracks at home. So these are very different models, and they yield very different results. Because what are you doing with 6,000, 10,000, 18 years old boys? Usually most of them are men, and you send them to a country that they cannot even find on a map. So do you think that they will do a great job? No, you will have a lot of work just keeping them under control. You know, young boys are full with testosterone. They do stupid things. If they are together in gangs, even more. And that means the control of that is difficult. And we know also the reports from many, many problems of UN missions in this regard. Yeah, because what comes in here are topics like drugs and prostitution, human trafficking, and so on. Yeah, so a lot of serious things, and the UN is confronted with that. So yes, that is true. And then, of course, the other point is, I mean, do you have volunteers, or do you have people who just have to go, recruits who don't have a choice? Yeah, and this is now on the military side, but it's very similar on the civilian sides, according to payment, according to the legal frame of the home nation state, you get the respective personnel. And in practical field, yeah, we see over and again how difficult it is. And even if it comes, that's even worse. Since 1992, since the Agenda for Peace, we have this principle of multinationalism, multiculturalism, multilateralism, and multidimensionalism. This brings mixes of people of very, very different kind, and to organize them properly is an enormous challenge. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for the question. I don't know whether this was really what you had in mind, but I just talk from my experience where I'm confronted with this problem over and again. Is this maybe the person who asked?
That's what about.
Yes, Professor. You can continue.
It's okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, good. Then I continue, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, so yeah, and of course, well, this now the question was related to what I just said. You become part of the conflict. You cannot be outside of a conflict. You even just watching is enough for being part of the conflict. So you better get prepared for that. And now we talked already regarding this question, or trying to answer this question. We talked about pre-deployment training, which is good if you get it. I have to tell you painfully that many big NGOs don't do that properly, not to talk about smaller NGOs where you don't get too much of that, if anything. Therefore, it is, and this is now the academic appeal here that I want to make, therefore it is so important that we give this basic training in peace studies while the people are still in the master program, on the master level. And if you want, also in the PhD, but PhD is a little bit more difficult because it's strictly academic. But here in a master, in the frame of a master, you can do that. And you need proper curricula because you cannot act against the law and not against the statute of your university and so on. So there are many challenges. And this is what I see as one of the main points that we have to discuss in the AARMENA project. When peace and reconciliation programs are developed, that we are aware of this challenge and also agree that preparing the people properly in this regard is a goal. Because of course you can also do theory of peace studies, and there's no claim that the people get ready for action. But just for giving you again the example of my university here in Innsbruck, we have almost 50% of our classes are practical classes, and we are, for example, cooperating with the Austrian Army, with officers who are experienced in international field missions, and we do a UN operation simulation of 2 weeks. So this is really a very complex thing. It is a role play, if you want, where about 120 soldiers are playing for 40 students twice a year. And this is a cooperation which is very strange. Many people say, well, what kind of peace workers are you? You cooperate with the army. And when the people see how we interact, they say, well, you even seem to love these people. Yeah. So I've never seen like these flower power peace people hugging soldiers. What are you doing? Yeah. Well, this is the result of many years of cooperation that makes the program really unique. And I think the learning effect is enormous. Similar, we have training with the firefighters, with the, in our country, Red Cross. So we do all field-related trainings there. And then this goes as far as the water rescue team, where we really do, well, trainings on rescuing, as the name says, in flowing and in water and in lakes and so on. Which is very important in real field missions, that you are prepared for these things. And we go with the cave rescue team and so on. So I mean, we don't want to get lost in details, but just for giving you an impression of what we are doing and how far this is away from the conventional imagination of an academic study. Because in the end, the students who do that all get grades. So they get graded, they have to write papers according to all academic standards while and after doing this training. And and this requires a curriculum according to the law. Yeah, this is question is the national law. In our case, in Austria and Germany, it's now more the European law because we have this common Bologna frame. I'm, I think, one of the few academics who is grateful for having Bologna. Most people don't like it. But this is what gives the frame, and then you have the university statute. We have the autonomy of the universities. So in each university you have different conditions, and then you have to fit there. And I guess it's the same story in all the universities in the world. When you create it, so talking about the curriculum, you have to get it through the gremia of the university. In our case, it is we just do it in a moment. We are just in a moment working on the 4th curriculum of our program in 20 years. And that means now at the moment, we have to get it through the curriculum commission of our faculty, after that through the Senate, after the Senate through the University Council, and then the team of rectors has to implement it. So that's this enormous procedure, and all of you probably know very well how long-lasting and painful this can be, yeah? Because you have always somebody who is against your plan, and then you have to do and change things and so on. So this has to be regarded, if you do peace studies, that you have a very particular logic and didactics in this discipline, in this transdiscipline. That's why it is a transdiscipline. And this has to be communicated to the broader university. Otherwise, they will kick you out and you will fail with your attempt to create such a program. So that's an important point. And from experience, I say that can last pretty long. Okay. So, and then just some few additional principles that Adam Curl proposed. What he also proposed, and what became very, very path-breaking again, was perceiving pieces relationally. So this leads us to a philosophical question. What is peace? So peace is usually grammatically, at least in European languages, used as an essence and as a singular itantum. So in most, not in most, in all European languages, the word for peace is the singular. And the meaning, the content is abstract, but an essence. So we want to get that peace, yeah, at the end of the history, or whenever, maybe a little bit earlier, we want to have that peace. Now, we know that in the name of this peace, we, the human beings, have killed each other for centuries. Question, is the concept of peace as a singular that helpful? Or might be, now I become provocative, is it that maybe Europe became so violent in world history because it has an idea of peace as a singular and as an essence? If so, wouldn't it help? First proposal, we will continue later with that. Wouldn't it help to understand peace as a plural? So if I ask you what is peace from your personal perspective, how many do we have, Ayat? I think 25 people or whatever.
28 people we have.
28. Okay, so we have 28 people who listen. Imagine I ask you now, and this is what our students have to do in the first class of each semester. They will be asked, what is peace from your very personal perspective? What usually happens in an academic environment is, and with first-term students in the master, is that they answer, well, according to Johann Galtung, we have positive and negative peace. A negative peace is the absence of physical violence, and a positive peace is the absence of physical and structural violence. So this student who writes that has failed, because the question was not, what is Johann Galtung's opinion about peace, but what is peace from your personal perspective? And according to my experience, many students have to repeat and repeat because they don't believe it. Yeah, I mean, they are already so shaped in their academic understanding that they don't believe that it is about their own, not only opinion, but even feeling, because peace is also a feeling. So when do you feel peacefully? Yeah. And then the first thing is, okay, now after some attempts, now I understand it's really about me. It doesn't help to quote Galtung or Lederach or one of the other heroes, Curl. No, it's about me. And then you see that most of these young people don't know what peace is for them. So it becomes a challenging exercise to write. Usually they have to write 5 pages, to write 5 pages just about what they personally perceive as peace. This is a great experience. I tell you, I mean, I'm doing that for 30 years now, and I still love it each semester. Because what you in the end get is so many interesting definitions. I have seen thousands of them. And what I found is that each of them has its own rights, its own beauty, and is connected to a personal career, a whole life of a person until this moment. And you learn so much about this person. But of course, these definitions are contradictory among themselves. So just in a class of 40 students, or 28 we have now, if we do this exercise, we will get 28 very different definitions. And if we then would try, never try to, please, I invite you not to try that. If you then try to find an agreement, you will see it's almost impossible. So now, do we have to take these interpretations seriously? My answer as a peace researcher, yes, because they are. So if a human being seriously perceives peace that way and defines it that way, whatever it is, and even if it is ridiculous or strange or weird to me, I have to respect this definition because it belongs to a real born human being. And from that follows from me quite logically that we better use the plural in our grammars for speaking peace. This seems to be very, very logical for me. I tell you from my experience as an author that I had my difficulties with the publishing houses with that. It began with the original German version of my trilogy which is called in German Variationen über die vielen Frieden. It was translated into English, and they would have to title many pieces. And I thought that's cool. Yeah, so that's different, and people will be interested. And then the sales and management department of Palgrave Macmillan, the publishing house, the big publishing house in England, they told me, no, we will not allow this book to be published under this title. And I said, why? They said, well, because it's grammatically wrong. And I said, yeah, okay, but I mean, in this error, seemingly error, is exactly the pepper, is the spice. Yeah, this is what we want to transport. We want to show that peace is only peace if a plural, if everybody can have and define peace. And so I cut a long story short. It took me quite a time to find a compromise with them. So the book's title is Not Many Pieces. And then I found with each translation in another language, the same story. Maybe the most funny and interesting one for the people who are now with us is my books have also been translated into Arabic, and we had the same story. So I wanted to have Salamat. And of course, the publishing house said, no, you cannot write that. It's the same story. In the case of the Arabic version, I won, and the title is Salamat. But only after convincing them and also the help of my translator, who gave them some tricky explanations about how you can use the word and so on. Yeah, so that's the one thing. So peace as a plural, and you see, well, this is, I'm still in the first line, just the word, and you see how long you can discuss that. And imagine we would really discuss now. So, but I want to invite you to go into that. What is peace from your very personal perspective, and how do you relate this definition to the definition of somebody else? And how do you get along when there is disagreement on these notions? And this leads me to the last word of the first line, relationally. Again, in its time, a big scandal. So Curl said, peace is not the issue of an individual doer. There is no peacemaker behind peace. So the Cartesian idea of the ego, or if you want, in a more spiritual sense, the soul as the doer of the deed of an individual, was not accepted anymore for in this frame of peace studies, of peace understanding. Peace, according to Curl, can only be found in the relation between individuals or groups of individuals, but never in the individual. So what does this mean? That also conflict is not a matter of guilt or bad deeds of individuals, but it is an not successful relational act. That is, the conflict is not with the guilt of an evildoer, but it is a relational accident, if you want. That means the conflict is in the relation and not in the individual, and therefore the energy for conflict transformation can only come from the relation. That means from the relation of the parties. Conclusion, you as a peace worker are not the maker of the peace of the parties. Never. That was a revolution in the 70s, and I tell you that most people today have still not understood that. Because we are used to say, well, something went wrong. So for example, somewhere a violent act has happened. The first question that you get in the news, that you get in the churches, that you get in the academic circles is, well, who is guilty? Yeah, just observe yourself. Yeah, how do you react? Yeah, something happened. Well, car crash. First question, who is guilty? Yeah, and this goes also for political, for social things, for cultural things, and so on. So, and with the awareness that the conflict and therefore also the transformation lies in the relation, we turn away from this individual guilt question between perpetrator and victim and ask, how can we re-establish balanced relations that function well? So that's the one point. Then with the same goes, this does not away the existence of individuals. Of course, Curl does not say there are no individuals in the world, but individuals are relational beings. And this has to do with the very fact of identification. Identification means making ident, and meaning what is an identity? And an identity is what I think now that I once have been. Yeah, that's identity. You cannot be ident with yourself. You are never ident with yourself. You are not the one who has been born that many years ago. No, you are just now the one that you are. And identification allows you to have an identity, which means you say, I am the one with this or that name that has been born, and the parents are, and so on. But that's a story in your mind. And this story changes constantly. With each experience of each day, this story changes. So you are never the same. Each morning you wake up, you are a different one. And this has to be understood. Now, but still we identify, so we are in real life individuals in relation. You cannot be not in relation. You are never alone. So even an eremit in the desert is in relation. And now the question is, where do we find peace if it is that complex with us, the human beings? Answer is, we find it in the balance between inner and outer. So peace is not in a political science sense, just an outer aspect. However nations relate or governments act or so on. Peace is not, as psychology says, just an inner experience, but it is for peace studies both together. And the question is, how do we find homeostasis, that is equilibrium, balance, between the life energies of inside and outside? So peace, or the opposite, is never alone in the outside and never alone in the inside, but in the relation between inside and outside, which from that comes that I can individually perceive peace even in war times, and I can perceive a lot of unpeace even in times of objective peace. Both is possible. So therefore we get, and again, a different understanding and a dynamic understanding of peace. And analyzing that requires skills that you will not get in one of the disciplines alone. Therefore, we are working as a transdiscipline. So, and the other one I think is better known, the last one, the third one, the private and the public pieces, they are also related. So in a way you can say, I close the door of my house and now I'm private, I'm alone, but whatever happens there is of course political and the inverse, which means, well, the most famous, I think, and most understandable, if you lock the door of your house and then beat your wife, this is also political. That's not only private. Yeah, so that's a public affair if you do that. And if you don't beat her, it's the same. It's also political. It's also public. Yeah. So the way how you organize your family, how you treat each other, even in the most private circle, has a political aspect and effect. So, and then Adam Curl highlighted the importance of personal and emotional development for the, as he called it, I already mentioned that, for would-be peace workers in training and study programs. So, and here you see, I mean, I said that already, but just for emphasizing that again. So this is a really important difference between peace studies and the neighboring connected disciplines. We have to work for the personal and emotional development of our students. And the didactics and the methods are different to just having them in a classroom and giving lectures to them. What the difference is can be discussed and will be discussed later, but this is really crucial. Yeah, this is what peace studies is. And well, I'm not an expert in reconciliation studies, but I guess that we have here quite some overlapping understandings. So then the other one, just for mentioning that, is then track 2 diplomacy as a consequence of that. I don't know whether you are familiar with the term. It simply means that diplomacy is too important for leaving it to diplomats. That's the simple expression of that. In other words, if we leave diplomacy to career diplomats, they will reproduce what they have done for centuries, because they are trained, this is their world, this is what they are doing. And this is not against them. This is very important what they are doing, and we respect it fully. But diplomacy is not complete if you leave it to the standards and to the lists of activities of these profession. So there are also possibilities to do the so-called track 2, and later it was called multi-track diplomacy, because there are other professional fields that can contribute a lot to diplomacy. And one of the most important, according to Ed and Curl, most important professional groups is you. Well, you, I have an idea who is listening now. You, from my understanding, are academics who are specifically trained in peace and conflict work, but are not diplomats, are not politicians, are not head of states or whatever, but still they work in the international field and they meet in other countries. This is why AARMENA is so beautiful, because there are people from similar fields, with academic fields, with similar academic interests, but very different backgrounds, cultural academic backgrounds, and they meet. And they are not only academics exchanging academic knowledge, but at the same time, they are messengers of their home country or whatever basic environment where they come from. So that means we have the chance, by doing things like AARMENA, we meet, we talk to each other, we get impressions, we exchange opinions, facts, analysis, and so on. And then we return, and since we are embedded in the network of decision makers of our countries, we feed our own political system with the information that we have got in these meetings. This became very, very popular and has been done systematically since the 1980s, and is now a very well-used method of peace work internationally. And I said, now, if it is track 2, it would mean you and me. This is also what I am doing. But multi-track means that there are many more professional groups. Just for mentioning, at least some importance would be business people, journalists, sports people, religious leaders, and similar things. That means everybody who has access to the decision makers of the other country can work in that field. And we know, if you go into contemporary history, especially in the 80s, these were super important. You know, this was the time when the Soviet system broke down. And in that time, when Ronald Reagan tried to power them down with his Star Wars project, the probability of nuclear war was extremely high. And the governments, especially in the Soviet Union, there were these very old leaders who died one after the next. So this was not a very functional system. And in that time, this track 2 was extremely important. And from what we know until now, we can say that we are still alive because they were there. And this is not over estimating whatever our own kind or whatsoever. This is what we know quite clearly, and not only the Western people, but also the people in the Soviet Union and in the communist countries. And particularly in this case, these were psychologists who played a key role. Okay, so just mentioning that. And then the importance of adequate methods of applied peace work. That means, again, practical training. It does not help just to tell the students in the classroom what could be done, or maybe make them write papers, but you have to make it hands-on. Learning is always receiving intellectual information and understanding it intellectually, first. Second, to play with it, to try to model it, to do something with it. And third, to understand the relevance for the future life of the student. So these 3 things have to be there. That means we have always doing things practically. This has to be an important part of curricula. And if it comes to peace and conflict work, and I guess again, reconciliation, you have to learn these things while you're doing your master. Okay. So you did not stop me, Ayat.
No, I did not. It was very interesting. I did not want to stop you.
Ah, okay.
We can give another 5 minutes if you want, and then we can take a break.
No, I would say let's have a break. I was looking now just because, I mean, after the next slide, there will be a change.
Okay.
So we have done this section, so to say, and I would say let's have the break now, and then we continue with something new after the break.
That's excellent, Professor. So how long should they take the break? 5 minutes is enough?
Now it's 5. We started with 20. Yeah.
5. So how
Well,
much do you need?
shall we say 5 culturally sensitive minutes?
Okay. 5 culturally sensitive minutes. So you come back at 8 to 10 minutes maximum. What do you think, Professor? Is that good?
Exactly. That's what I meant. Yes.
Okay, that's the chance.
But this was now a German statement, right?
Yeah, now it's a German statement. From 8 to 10 minutes is the break. So we start in 5 minutes in the culturally sensitive break. It's only 5 minutes. Just have a coffee. I will make also a coffee for myself.
Yes.
Once I come back, we start. So take 5 minutes minimum.
Okay.
Okay.
Please, one coffee for me, Dr. Iyad, also.
Yeah, you need a coffee, Professor. Are you
Yes,
drinking?
yes, please.
I have Arabic coffee from Jordan. From Al Amid.
Next time when we come to Yana.
Okay. It's from Professor Schreider. I think he is here as well. We still have his coffee. So I will be back in 5 minutes.
Professor Schreider, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
We'll bring it to you,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah, you are still here.
Don't worry, don't worry.
Yeah, I have still little bit. We had 2 packs and we finished them all, and we need another 2 packs.
So don't drink tea in this case.
Yeah. So I know I still have a little bit of coffee. I will go drink, make it, and come back.
Franz, du ganz kurz. Ich bin nämlich also gerade in der Vorlesung und dann gerade sehr kurz Pause. Wegen der Buchung, ja? Könntest du uns vielleicht doch diese erste Februarwoche tentativ reservieren? Ich muss am Mittwoch noch in einer Sitzung nachher das abklären, ob Sie einverstanden sein. Aber es wäre jetzt die Tendenz, es dort zu machen. Also Sie wollen im Mai ist zu spät, weil wir dann nach Algerien fahren. Aber dort hätten Sie es ganz gern machen. Und ich bestätige es dann noch, aber dass du es mal das nicht an jemand anderen vergibst. 30 bis 35, nicht? Wobei man natürlich immer das Problem haben, dass halt der gebrauchten Visa teilweise, also, aber das ist jetzt mal die Zahl, die genannt ist. Und ich halte, also wenn es erstens halte ich die auch beschlossen, also am Mittwoch werde ich sagen, ob es passt. Und dann halt vorzu, wenn ich weiß, wer ausfällt, oder nicht, dann sage ich, dass das anpassen kann. Ja? Gut, super. Also und wenn du zum Eintragen ist, das heißt AARMENA mit Doppel-A am Anfang. Also das ist die von der Universität Jena, wo ich jetzt gerade unterrichte, die Vereinigung zum Mittleren Osten und Nordafrika. Das ist eine coole Sache. Ja, gut, fein, super. Danke. Gut, ciao, ciao. So I am here and ready. I'm not sure. Am I all alone?
No, we are all with you. We have.
We are with you. We are with you.
Okay, so shall I continue?
Yes, Professor,
Yes.
you can continue.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I just realized that I didn't switch the microphone off and you listened to my telephone call, but it's for Dr. Ayat, it's good news. I reserved the 1st February week for the moment.
Ah, that's
Just, yeah, but this is not relevant for the others.
Yeah,
Okay.
we heard you, Professor. We heard you, but we are not able to recognize all words.
I think, yes, because this was not only German, this was the rolling dialect. Okay, so yeah, what I just see now in the chat, since I had time during the break to read that, I see that I didn't answer the last part of the question, which says, is it enough and methodologically correct to analyze laws and constitution of a country in order to prepare peace-building PhD project? Well, depending in which discipline. Of course, definitely in law, yes. That's enough. And it is also possible if you have a separate discipline, transdiscipline, in your university that is peace studies. If you have a supervisor for that, I would say same story, yes. But I guess that the supervision in peace studies will be sort of different, and you will be invited to go beyond the very strict borders of or limits of law. Yeah? So you would be probably invited to play with that in a more practical way. But in general, the answer to this question is yes. Okay, so then just having done all the things from before, I would like to continue now with discussing a little bit the modern interpretation of peace, because so far I just introduced to you to Adam Curl, and this is a very, I would say, unusual. I think not many lectures on the history of peace studies start just with Adam Curl, because in a chronology he is somehow in the middle, and you would not start from there. But I think we had a good reason for doing that, because it was for our purpose here to discuss transdisciplinarity as a first thing. Now let us go back in history, and I'm very sorry that I invite you only now into European and basically male patriarchal history. Why? Because it has an important impact. We can discuss it very critically, but still we have to discuss it. And of course, we could go further, and I guess that some of you will like to go further, or let's say also further back, and discuss pre-modern or not modern, unmodern notions of pieces. And what would be very, very interesting, and we will do that, but not today, is, for example, the moral interpretations of peace, which is usually related to religions. We could start the debate on what is peace. So what is the subject of our transdiscipline? We could start with, I think for many of you quite clear, well, peace is one of the names of God in your languages. Yes, so what are we doing? What are we studying when we study peace? So basically we study God. It means we study the universe, everything that exists with our limited human mind. This is an option. You can try to do that, and people do that. Or even if I switch to the Christian, which is here not very far away from the Muslim understanding, this is also the one and only peace of the one and only God be with you in the Christian formulas. It's the same story. If you start to study that, I mean, you will be busy for a lifetime. So that is possible, and of course this is subject of meditations, of prayer, of of religious understandings and interpretations and so on, but it is not the topic of our class today. So what I want to discuss is the modern notions of peace, because they have a different structure and they were very powerful and have an effect on our way of understanding peace until today. And then we will see where do we get into the understanding of peace studies as a discipline. So let's jump to the early days of modern Europe and see that the philosophical roots of modern peace philosophy is the belief in the great narrations as formed in the teachings of, and now I give you three persons, three gentlemen, if you like, who are not so important as individuals now. The point here is they are metaphors for certain ways of thought. So, and these gentlemen are hiding. They are hiding. Why are they not coming? That's what happened. I can't move the slide anymore. Ah, here they go. Okay, so the first one is Thomas Hobbes. The second is René Descartes, and the third one is Isaac Newton. So what metaphors are they? What are their names standing for? Thomas Hobbes, as you know, I will come more to him in a separate slide later. He lived in the time of the so-called 30 Years' War, which was a war between two different Christian sects that devastated the whole continent, European continent. And some people call it the First World War. Yeah, that refers to the real First World War because it involved so many. So it was horrible, and Thomas Hobbes personally saw a lot of atrocities and horrible things. And the decision, what he as a philosopher learned from his life experience was that human beings can be extremely cruel. And we can do the most horrible things to our own kind. And from that, as a philosopher, he concluded that we, the human beings, are bad by nature. So that was the principal presumption of Hobbes. We are bad by nature. And what do we conclude? If we are bad by nature, we need something or somebody who domesticates this wild, bad animal, human being. So the famous sentence is discriminating male human beings, because it says the man's wolf. There's a multiple discrimination. First, the wolf. Wolves are not bad animals. Second is, of course, the male human being, because it includes in his understanding, of course, also female. So he was not very gender sensitive and therefore, well, wrote that way. But if we do that away, it is clear the message is we are so bad that we have to be domesticated. And the best thing is you put us into a cage. And the name of the cage was called nation state. So if you gather human beings in nation states, you can organize them and create a structure that avoids that the human being applies physical violence. What do you need for that? Quite clear, something like police, however you call it. And the political control by a powerful government. And at the same time, if we know that not only the beings in the cage are bad by nature, but also the ones around the cage. That means in the other nation states. So therefore, the purpose of the state is not only appeasing the wild animal within the cage, but also defending these animals against the wild animals outside. So that was the main idea of the nation state. We will come back to that and see what it does. Because behind or after, as a consequence of this presumption, we get a specific type of nation state. And this has a lot to do with our understanding of peace. I mean, it's clear from the very beginning, if we are bad by nature, what is peace? Peace in this definition is that we avoid violent acts that we do against each other. And we will always do them if we are not controlled because we are bad. So that's the presumption, and this is how the nation state begins. Totally understandable from the experience of the time, but highly problematic on the long run until the 21st century. That was the first one. The second one I already mentioned, René Descartes, who got this idea of the separation of the perceiving subject and the perceived object. So he gave a very important direction of the scientific development, of the development of modern science. A modern science has always to do with the tension or the separation of subject and object. You can only study an object and you can understand it with your human mind. Now, his main topic was, therefore, how does the human mind work? And there he gave another separation, which is the separation between body and mind. And what he did for that purpose is that he copied in a way, with different words, the old Christian idea of the eternal free soul. So, you know, in Christianity, and I think that's very similar in Islam, we believe that the soul is separated from the body and existed already before the birth of the physical body and is also existing after the death of the physical body. In other words, the soul only resides in the physical body for some time of mundane existence, but it existed before and after. And whatever happens while this physical body is used has a consequence of the condition of the soul in the aftermath. So that's the religious interpretation. But what Descartes did, he said, well, no, soul is a difficult concept, but what about mind? If you go into Latin, then you see that the difference is not that big. Animus and spirit are almost the same. Yeah, so this is just two different ancient languages, expressions for the same thing. So now the idea was what he meant with spirit, he meant the mind. And the point is now the same story. The mind is carried through the planet, through the mundane world by the body. Did I say the mind is carried by the body, right? And from that separation came for him and for the ones who followed for centuries that we have our noble mind. So what really makes your personality is the mind, and the body is the minor, somehow dirty, temporary aspect of existence. So the mind uses the body. And from that, now followed the next idea or the next question. So, well, how do we find then an I, an ego? And you could say a soul in the human body. Where in the human body? And if you are very fascinated and very attached to the mind of the human existence as an aspect of human existence, then you will end up in the brain. This is what happened with Descartes. So he said the mind is in the brain. From neuroscience of the 21st century, we know that's bullshit. But he believed. And he started to do practical experiments. So what he did, he opened skulls. He took the brains and he cut the brain into slides, and he was looking for this ego center in the brain. He was sure there must be the seat of the, now again, the metaphoric soul, the ego, the I in this brain. He called that the homunculus. So his idea was there is, in my case, a little Wolfgang sitting in my brain and giving orders to the big Wolfgang. And he was looking for the center and he couldn't find it, which drove him crazy. Yeah, I mean, we know why he couldn't find it, because it's not there. So there is no ego center. And we don't have to go into all the details of the long history until we got away from that. Dramatic for us as academics of the 21st century is that we know for decades now that there is definitely no ego center in the brain. This does not exist. Neuroscience tells us clearly. But in neuroscience, there's no problem with that anymore, because it's state of the art and everybody is doing different things. But this message has not got through so well to other academic branches. So for example, in social science, we still use literature and we still go with presumptions that start from the existence of the individual ego, the I in the Cartesian sense. And we call academic scientific endeavor only, we have rules for that, and we evaluate that way only if it is done in a Cartesian way. So that's an important point, because Cartesian way of doing science, it's called Cartesian reductionism, is the characteristic of modernity. And now we know that the presumption per se, the idea of the human being, was wrong. Same with Hobbes, yeah? You cannot academically defend his presumptions anymore. They are falsified. But they were so powerful, and not only powerful, but successful. Cartesian science developed an enormous knowledge technologically. Well, in all the different disciplines, including philosophy and so on. So we have now a treasure of knowledge that we owe to Cartesian science, while we know that the presumption, the basic presumption of this science is misleading. That's a very interesting time that we are living in. And especially for the not natural science branches, this is very hard to swallow, and many simply ignore. I would also say for most of peace studies, this applies, they ignore, but I invite you strongly to reflect that when you write a curriculum and which kind of methods you use. And this leads me to the third gentleman as a metaphor. This is Isaac Newton. I think you know he's famous for being the first one who calculated the circulation of the stars in the sky. And of course, this was an enormous achievement. And the political consequence of that was that the people said, well, if we, the human beings, are that brilliant that we can calculate where the planet Venus has been 2000 years ago in a certain moment, then probably we can calculate everything in the world. Yeah, so for example, in social science, we would say, if we can calculate where the Venus has been 2000 years ago, why shouldn't we be able to calculate how many potatoes our population will need in 5 years? Yeah, it seems to be simple. Yeah, and this was exactly this human vanity that came from this being brilliant and being able to calculate, created a scientific approach that did not need God anymore. Until then, and this is the difference between modern and moral. Modern science thinks it does not need God. In a way, all of these gentlemen and many more were busy with the question, okay, if we can calculate the universe, we are really great. Human beings are so brilliant. But what we cannot say is why the universe exists. So in a way, we cannot say we forget about God, but we can say we, in a way, ban God into the second floor and don't talk about him anymore. And in the case of need, we call him. So that's the property of modern science. Yeah, is this a question or because I see something in the chat, or?
No, it's a comment about René Descartes, that he did something called the Cartesian doubt, that it started to become a kind of a science way of thinking.
Yes. Yes.
That's what you were referring to.
This I didn't refer directly to that, but it's correct and connected to it. Yes, so we have agreement here. Yeah. So that means the three together are, if you want, again, please don't take them individually, but as metaphors. So these ways of thought, of philosophy, are the fundament of modern science and of modern politics, because politics in the modernity also roots in science. So we created with Thomas Hobbes nation states, and we administer these nation states in a or at least we claim to do so in an academic, in a rational way. So rationality is the key word here, because rationality is now the new God. We are so vain in modernity that we, as I said before, think we can think it all. If we don't know it yet, we can do academic work and we will find it out, whatever it is. And therefore, a banning sentence in academia, in modernity, is, this is not rational. So that's a killing sentence. Yeah, if you are in a dispute with somebody and the other one tells you that your opinion or your statement, your perspective is not rational, you are an outcast. Yeah, because the virtue of modern thought is rationality. This is the new God, so to say. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, we will talk about the difference then more the next time. But for the moment, just having this clear, that this is what is the frame of the mindset when we talk about peace in modernity. I see a hand. Is this for me?
Yes, there's a question, and it's by Mr. Wan. The Hobson's nation state is an authoritarian state. What type
Yes.
of peace should we expect under such a regime?
Yes, we will come to that immediately. This is the next slide, I think. Yeah, thank you. This is very, very well thought. Yeah, now again, somehow the cursor doesn't do that, but that. Okay, this is now. Here, just you have some attempts, some drawings to express that what I just said. Okay, yes, and now we will go through that. Modern peace. Now, what is peace? This was exactly the question of this intervention. Now, what is then modern peace? What kind of peace can we expect from the main peace thinkers? And here again, you have now four gentlemen. Hobbes comes in again, and they offer different variations of modern peace thought, and we go into these details. Please, from now on, just watch the colors of the font, because this has a meaning. From now on, we have this dark blue stands for realism as a political school of thought, the light blue for idealism, the green one, well, for Rousseauian thought. We will come to that, what it exactly means, and then the red one, well, surprise, surprise, for a Marxist approach. Yeah, so the colors have a meaning. Just bear that in mind. Okay, and now these four representatives stand for, this is important for us now in peace studies, this is now again different to history or to philosophy or to political science, how we look at them. Each of them stands for a tradition of thought and philosophical current which has remained effective over generations. So the first attempt to an answer to the question that has been made would be, well, we have different ones in modernity, but each of them claims to be the only one. And this, of course, creates a problem. If you have many and everybody says, mine is the only one. So how do we deal with that? We see there is already quite a potential for conflict. And this is what you see in the European modernity. We have a lot of wars. Yeah, and we have a lot of violence within the states, and we have a lot of conflicts in communities, in groups, and so on. So these four are here, yeah, I think I go just right because I have this each individual one, just for introducing these ones with the colors to you, and then we go now to each separately. And now the second part of my answer to the question that has been raised, Thomas Hobbes. Let's return to Thomas Hobbes. I said already that his main observation and thought is that man is the man's wolf, and he thinks that wolves are bad. Therefore, we, the human beings, are bad, and we have to be domesticated in a cage called nation state. Now, I agree with the one who asked the question, saying, well, the fact is an authoritarian state. What kind of peace shall we expect? Yes, that's the question. Well, the answer is more or less already in the question, because what we will get is, under these conditions, an authoritarian version, an order, a peace out. You see the sword as the drawing that symbolizes that, peace out of security. So peace is closely related to security. That means the nation state takes the responsibility for the internal peace and defends the internal people against the outside aggression. Now, I want to go deeper into the question, what kind of state do we get? Put yourself into the shoes of the end of the 30 Years' War, 1648. The continent was bleeding, was completely devastated, and the elites decided, from now on we create nation states. And this is what happened then gradually. So what would you have to do if you are in part of the elite? What do you need first if you want to create a nation state that has not existed before? Does anybody have a proposal? Where would you start? Under the conditions, 30 Years' War is gone, over, the famous Westphalian peace agreement, and now we have to do something that we have never done before. We create the project called nation state. So where would you begin? And this is the main, maybe the one who asked the question could try and answer. I'm sorry that I didn't see the name.
Mm-hmm. Can you repeat the question, Professor, again?
Yeah, I repeat. Maybe for really getting everybody on board, and of course it's free, whoever wants to come in is welcome. So the question is, put yourself into the shoes of the elites of that time. 1648, the 30 Years' War is over. The continent is destroyed. You have two big religious groups. This is, I think, sounds somehow familiar to Muslims. You have two religious group. You have various language groups, and you don't want to finance. You cannot finance wars anymore. And the idea is, now we create a nation state. You sign the contract where this is stated, and now you have to do it. So where do you start? Where do you get the nation state from? So what you have to imagine is a world without nation states, because this is what they found. This was a generation that were the first ones to implement a new structure that they called nation state. So where would you begin?
Would you start with the head of the state? So choosing the person with power?
Not a bad idea, yes, but how long will you stay alive if you start there?
Well, you're talking about elites, so definitely they have power already.
Why? Where do they have the power?
They asserted their power from by signing the agreement itself. So they're representing the people by signing the Westphalian agreement.
Yeah, well, they agree on that, yes. But this is a paper. This is maybe an understanding of elites. Now, elites are not new. Elites have existed before. And the elites were the ones who made the 30 Years' War. And that the difference that you have to see now this time-changing thing was that until then, including the whole war, that 30 Years' War, elite means that you are an aristocrat and you are rich because you exploit the farmers. And you use the money that you get for paying experts of war. So the word soldier comes from Latin and comes from sold. So what is the sold? The sold is the money, is the payment that the expert of fighting gets for sacrificing his life. Yeah, so a soldier is one who fights for money. Today we would say a mercenary or whatever sort of people, but a professional fighter who is well trained in killing others, who is well trained in the use of all kinds of weapons, and sells these skills to the elites who can pay, and he fights for him who pays him best. Well, we know that. I mean, I don't know how interested you are, but if you look at today's football scenery, that's exactly that. Yeah. So if Paris pays Messi better, then he goes to Paris and leaves Barcelona. So, yeah. And this is not only Messi. I don't want to just talk about him, but this goes for everybody. This is how the business works. This was exactly the same business. Yeah. So yesterday, this great fighter killed my soldiers, whom I had paid. Now I pay him and pay him more than my opponent. And now he comes to me and he kills for me and he kills the ones with whom he had fought before. So I think with football, you can perfectly imagine that. But now the difference is they really kill each other and they really shoot, and not only with a ball. Yeah. So that's how it was. That means the elites were there, and the elites at that time were completely bankrupt because they had spent so much money for killing. So you have in the here and now these elites, yes, but they don't have too much money, and they agree that they do not continue with this soccer style of fighting each other. Now, what is the alternative? Thomas Hobbes says this, well, give the human being the cage, and probably, yes, this cage will be dominated by somebody from the elites. But for being able to do so, this exponent of the elite needs an army. And that's the key point here. The question was, what kind of peace do we get under Hobbesian conditions? And this is the answer. The answer is you get a peace that begins with the idea of a nation state. So people speak the same language, people are organized as one group. And the core element of that is the army. And that's the big difference to the previous time. So no more soccer style buying and selling of soldiers, but the soldiers have to be taken from the nation state, from their own country. And they have to be equipped and they have to be trained, and they create now a national army. This is what we are used to. National armies, everybody in the same uniform, everybody following the same orders, everybody in the same structure and so on. So this was new at that time. And that's the key difference now. And now imagine what kind of, I go with this question because it was really so perfect. Now, what kind of peace do we get? When you start, yeah, okay, I as the head of state or one of the ministers, whatever, of the few people in the elites, I have to create, first of all, an army. Then where do I take the soldiers from? I cannot afford too many old soldiers anymore. They are still around and I can maybe employ them, but it's not enough for a complete army. So what is new is now the idea of the recruitment of soldiers from the peasants' sons. So the usual habit in most of the European states is from then on that the not firstborn sons of peasants have to serve in the army for a certain time. That's totally different to what we had before. They are not professionals anymore. They are recruits. So that means you get these boys from their family somewhere in the countryside. You concentrate them in a place, and there you want to train them. And now you see already the next problem that you have. Because if you concentrate them, some thousands of these young boys, where do you do that? Well, the simple answer is we all know where it happens, in barracks. But at that time, they didn't have barracks. So you have to build barracks. And how are you doing that? Well, you need people who are experts in building these big buildings that are, well, proper for the hosting so many people and doing all the trainings and so on. And where do you get that from? Well, what you get now is the beginning of a private enterprise around the state sector, because somebody has to offer systematically these buildings, and building them is big business. So you can get very rich if you are able to do that. So the problem here is only that the state has to pay for that. And here you see the beginning of the flow of public income into private benefit. And the question is, where does the state get this money from that you have to pay for getting barracks? Now, I think everybody knows, because we all are now subject of that, taxes. Yeah, so the people have to pay taxes. That means that the farmers, because we are talking about mainly rural societies, the farmers do not only sacrifice their children, but they also pay the taxes. So the ones who are at home have to work hard in order to finance that. And now I try to cut a long story short, but if you follow me, I think it's pretty understandable. Well, it is not enough just to build big houses and have thousands of young boys there. But for example, once they are there, well, you have to nourish them. Where do you get the food from? Well, again, private business, and you have to pay for that. Where do you get the money from? Taxes. Then you have to dress these young boys. Yeah, that means uniforms. Where do you get uniforms from? Well, private textile industry, big business. You have to pay from that. How do you pay? Taxes. Next thing is, you have to train them. So you still have these elite soldiers, the old ones, who can be officers and trainers, but you have to pay them. How do you pay them? Taxes. Next point is that you need, if you have thousands of young people together in small places, you will have health problems. So you need a health system, you need doctors. How do you get them? Well, big business, you have to pay taxes. What else? Yeah, well, still now we have a lot of soldiers, but they don't have weapons. So you need, of course, weapons for the soldiers. They have been produced in big factories, big business, private enterprise. You have to buy that, taxes, and so on. Yeah, so I think the logic is clear. And it is not done, even if we get to a moment when everything that you need in barracks for training soldiers is there, even then you are not done. Because now imagine that our old elite soldiers give commands to these young boys, and these young boys come from the country. I don't know in your countries, but the ones who have listened to my telephone before and didn't understand, they couldn't, because I was speaking really a very local dialect. This is normal everywhere. So boys in the countryside speak a local dialect that is usually not well understood certain distance away from home. So what you need is, before you take them away from the families, is that you teach them a certain language that allows them to understand the commands and the instructions that they get in the barracks. How do we call that? Schools. So you make a mandatory schooling system, which was very conflictive everywhere in the world when it was introduced. And then we get to the same stories. For schools, you need buildings, you need dresses, you need nourishment, you need teachers, and taxes. Yeah, same story. So, and this is then, we have what you see as a result, for cutting a long story short, is that the schooling or the educational system in all the modern European nation states is a paramilitary section. What I mean with paramilitary is, if you look at the structure of organization, it is the same as an army. Yeah, you have the higher ranks, and you have the teachers, which would be officers, and so on. So you can really compare that, and it goes from primary school to the universities. Since we are cooperating with the army a lot, I soldiers are sometimes very surprised when I tell them, look at the university, we are organized exactly like you. So the team of rectors of a university is like a continental staff system. Yeah, if you see the distribution of work that they have, that's like the different officers in a staff. So same story. Yeah, this is about the educational system. Then just mention, without losing more time for that, that of course you need a health system, and the health system is also organized like an army. Same story again with the system of hospitals and so on, and the personnel there. So same, it's the same story. And then what I have not mentioned yet is that you need an administrative system that takes all these taxes in and distributes them in a proper way so that this whole machine can work. So that all has to be and had to be created. So we shouldn't be too astonished that it took some 100 years until they really got there. Answer to a long answer to the short question is, well, this is the kind of peace that you get, because in this understanding, it means that if this machinery works, then you have the control of the people internally, and you can defend the country against the external enemy. That's the peace that you get. That's Hobbesian peace. So the consequence of that is now, for becoming more general, or if you want more political, is protectionism. Protectionism, why? Because you produce your own goods from your own resources for your own people. And you don't give it to the others, and you don't allow that the others intervene into your market, into your national market. An important thing is you need rearmament, because you need a lot of arms for defending the country on the borders against the others. And for us, the most important point here is now the action guiding psychological principle is fear. So, and this is now really the answer to the question that we had. Well, what you get in a Hobbesian form of a nation state is peace out of fear. The leading quality of action in society is fear. And now we have the problem that we know that all human beings have the potential for feeling fear. We all can be afraid. Question: do we just try to process that? Can we observe, yes, now I'm afraid, yes, fear is there? Or does fear become an ideological principle, an ideological psychological principle, and all our political decisions are made out of fear? The sad answer is still to the one who asked before, is that the history of modern peace is pretty much that. So it is peace out of fear, and we are trained in order to be afraid of each other. So we really believe, yeah, we even fear wolves, not to talk about human beings. We fear our own kind, and we act accordingly. So the point here is, this is not a natural law. This is a mindset, beliefs, a system of beliefs that has been created historically for certain reasons, but it is not the ultimate truth. Nobody says that we have to continue doing that. We just have to be able to discuss it systematically. And that's why we need peace studies. That's one of the aspects why we need peace studies. So fear. Is this okay for everybody? Are you still with me? Yes? Okay. Thank you. Okay, then I continue with the light blue. This is Immanuel Kant, who lived, as you can see, sometime later. And he goes basically with the same idea in his philosophy, but he divinizes the principle, another principle, which is reason. So he says the principle of reason creates the insight into the advantage of a peaceful world. While Hobbes stressed this moment of being afraid, now Kant stresses the moment of rationality, of being reasonable, because we can. So his observation is human beings are intelligent, and we can use our intelligence. If so, well, why shouldn't we, if we have a problem, sit down and talk about it rationally? And we find together, we the opposing parties, we find together a solution. Why not? And if we embed this idea into the nation state, we get now a different form of state. The consequence of this presumption is, first of all, a democratic state, which we did not have under Hobbesian conditions. So democracy, however we exactly define it, but a sort of democracy, sitting down and talking about it. This is what parliaments are for. So we talk about it and we find ways how we can get along. And also the Republican, that means he does away with these old elites that we call aristocracy and gives the power into the hand of the people, which is now interesting. Still the cage is there, but the cage now becomes a self-organized endeavor of the inhabitants as a factor of internal order. And then, interesting, he finds, well, if the other ones, the ones who are outside of the cage, are also rational beings, we could do the same with them. So instead of killing them when they appear, we could sit down and discuss with them, and maybe we find ways to make our world mutually and commonly a little bit more beautiful. So, and the key word for that, or the key measure here, is disarmament. Very clear, the observations. If I come heavily armed and you see me, you will be afraid, and if you can, you will get your arms and try to strike. If I come naked and you see open arms, nothing in my hands, I cannot do any harm to you, you will not be that stressed, and you might do the same and show that you also don't do harm, and we can sit down and talk, and whatever the topic might be. So that's the idea. The consequence is disarmament, because if I have less armed soldiers on the borders, it is likely that the other ones do the same. That's at least the presumption of Immanuel Kant. And he even goes further, and that's quite interesting for us today, that he even proposed a peace-oriented union of sovereign states. So in the writings of Kant, you can find the first time the proposal for what we nowadays call the United Nations. Of course, it's not formalized like it is today, but the idea is there. So now the question is, if you do that all and not only think it philosophically, but you make it real, what is the action guiding psychological principle? And that is hope. Why is it hope? Because you can appeal to the rationality of the other, but you never have the guarantee that you really get the response that you are waiting for. So what I just said before, I disarm, I approach you with open arms and welcome you with open arms, does not guarantee that you do not strike. You could still do it. So that means, in order to trust into the situation, to trust the encounter, I need hope as the main psychological principle. So that's very different. And you see, we can discuss long time the philosophical differences between Kant and Hobbes, and many people did it. There are libraries written about that. But the main point for us here is that the psychological approaches are completely different. So it is, on the one hand, a fear-driven political activity, on the other hand, a hope-driven, hoping political activity, a decision-making process. Okay, is this hand for me?
Yes, we have a question.
Please.
Ghani. And he asks if this army state is existing, and now reflecting by some countries as he sees it, can peace actors participate in an army state if it's possible to achieve peace in such a state?
Oh, I think I will have to read that. I didn't get it completely. The army state is existing now, reflected by some countries. To achieve peace in the army state. Well, I mean, in an army state, you will get an army peace. So in a Hobbesian state, you get an Hobbesian peace. In a Kantian state, you get a Kantian peace. And the Kantian peace is risky. So what we have seen in history is that many tried the Kantian approach, and they turned away from it because of bad experience. And of course, we also see the opposite. Yeah, we see examples very often discussed. Is, for example, the case of Costa Rica that abolished in 1947 its army, and is still until today doesn't have an army, and it lives in an environment which is pretty violent. Yeah, like you have Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala. These are all violent states around. So in a way, they managed to do that, and they are an example for this can work. And we have further examples. In the south of the Americas, you have Uruguay in a similar way. They have an army, but very weak. Yeah, or my own state, yeah, Austria. I mean, we have an army, but very weak and very specialized on specific things. And for example, in the case of an aggression of one of the bigger neighbors, we couldn't stand for 2 days. So, I mean, not even against Germany, which is also not well armed. But no, the idea when I was young and I was in the army, the imagined enemy was always Russia. And all our security plans said, well, 2 to 3 days we can resist. Days. So that means that Austria is also an example, and Switzerland is such an example. There are states that function differently, the Scandinavian states. So it exists, yeah. But the development of the political conditions around the state can change that, or in the state, yeah. So the question is, this is the peace question. Are we afraid, or do we dare to hope? And the result, the consequence of that is very, very different. And if you look now in the democratic states, for example, in the political parties, how they deal with that, you have, at least in the European countries, currently, you have everywhere a fear-driven party. And most of them are in parliament and very strong. But you have, of course, others who are hope-driven, and in many countries still, at least together, the opposing ones together, the mainstream. But you can see, I mean, since for example, Ayat is living in Germany, and you know this terror in the eyes of German citizens when the AfD wins some percentage in the elections. Why? Because it would deprive the Germans from this hope principle, which you find in the Social Democrats and the Conservatives. They agree in this hope, yeah. So let's talk and we will find a solution. Yeah. But if you have another player who doesn't not only not play along these lines, but does not feel along these lines, you are really in trouble. And this is what we see in many countries at the moment. Okay, so much about Kant, and now again here. Okay, so then just mentioning the economic aspect of that with using Adam Smith. I think that everybody knows him as the, let's say, the godfather of liberal, economic liberal, and also value liberalism. I cut that down to a few sentences. That he's stated that trade partners do not shoot each other because it's not profitable. So what can we learn from that? I mean, if he's right, the point is, if we have trade with somebody, with another state, another group of states, then we will not have violence because the businessmen don't like war, because the profit is higher in times of peace. If we have free access to the harbors, to the streets, to the markets of the other. So the consequence was the so-called open door policy, which is the policy that makes markets open. And among the, well, of course, the very clear idea to make a lot of money with that, there was also the promise that if we do that, there will be no violence between the trade partners and among the trade partners. So that means from that comes liberalism as an action guiding political principle for the wealth of nations. This was the famous title of the book of Adam Smith. And so we see that it is still light blue. Everything that Adam Smith says agrees pretty much with Kant. In Kant, we see more a political philosophical principle. Here it's more economic, but those two things go together, and that's what they did. So this is the core of liberalism. And the last one that we have to mention here, also in the same family, so to say, is David Ricardo, whose belief sentence, it is very famous, was that capitalism results in permanent benefit for everybody because of the comparative advantage of costs. And this is I made it bold because that's the key word here. So the comparative advantage of cost says if everybody produces as much of the goods that can be produced the cheapest on the respective place and then makes trade, everybody will benefit the most. And if we benefit, we don't shoot each other and don't kill each other. That's the belief sentence. So is this the experience that we have? Because this is a liberal principle. This has to do with Adam Smith, open door policy, and all these principles of rationality and talking to each other with in the Kantian sense. So this goes all together. So is this what we have learned from history since then? Well, if I ask that way, it's clear what the answer will be. Well, not really. Let us see where it takes us. Well, the consequence, according to Ricardo, would be progress. And here comes another magic word in the modern world: progress. So modernity means that we constantly progress. What was yesterday is outdated, is old-fashioned, is not cool anymore. Today's new achievement is cool. And tomorrow we will have another new cool, and today will be traditional, outdated, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so the idea of progress becomes the core dynamic of modern thought. And you see that when I say, well, what is the opposite of modern? Just linguistically, you will get the answer, well, traditional. And the interesting point here is that modernity itself produced this opposition. You don't find the opposition between modern and traditional in pre-modern languages. They don't know that. So what you need is this idea and the adoration of a vectoral chronosophy. Vectoral chronosophy means you imagine time as a vector and we progress constantly. Now, what comes from that, if you combine it with the idea of the nation state, is that you get a constant race of the progressing nations. Whatever one nation has to be had also by the other. Yeah, you invented the car, and now you are able to drive cars. We need that as well. You found TV, we need that as well. You found telephones, we need that as well. And this is a turning wheel that never ends. It becomes faster and faster and faster and faster. And in the value system, you have this notion that progress and growth are good per se. And look at our political discourses around the world today. who would dare to say, I don't want progress? Or if the politicians tell you, well, you know, our national product has to grow, who would say, no, I create a party that is for degrowth? Yeah, this exists among students as a philosophical idea. But politically, I mean, you will never win an election with promising less progress and less growth. So that means we are like a hamster in the wheel, running faster and faster and faster. And the faster you run, the faster I have to run. And we progress, progress, progress. So this is, if we follow Ricardo and Smith, the action guiding principle for economic science and economic politics. Yes, so then, does anybody oppose this idea? Answer, yes, this gentleman, Karl Marx, who turned the Ricardo's belief sentence upside down. He made, everybody knows that, historic analysis of the development of nations, of societies, of economies. And what he found is the opposite of Ricardo. He says, capitalism results in the misery of the majority for the benefit of a decreasing number of winners. Yeah, so this is what he says and how he analyzes the societal development under the condition of capitalism. Now, this is not over with that, because I mean, he says he has scientific evidence. Marx is a strict academic person. So the society can overcome this dynamic and progress to a higher form of existence. So that means we, the human beings, we can overcome capitalism. Isn't that great? Yeah, and we can calculate how this will be in the future. You remember Newton and Descartes. No, the consequence is again progress. So here we don't have too much difference, but now the progress is written in red and not in light blue. And the main point is revolution. So why revolution? Because we have some game spoilers in capitalism who do not play according to the natural path, and they think that they can benefit more than others from the capitalist game. These people are the capitalists. These are the ones who have the goods, who have the capital. And if we only get rid of them, if we take them out of the way, it will be fine, because then we can together create the paradise on earth. We don't need God. We don't have to wait for the transcendent life. We can do it just on the planet. We can do it here. So let's make revolution. Let's get rid of these evildoers and we will be fine. How can you advocate such a belief? Well, only if you are scientifically, rationally, totally convinced that the game will work the way how you plan it. So you understand human society like a machine, and like an engineer, you can plan how the machine works. And you do the dysfunctional parts away, the capitalists, just kill them and they are gone, and then you don't disturb anymore. And for the rest, the machine will run and you have paradise on earth. So the point here is, the action guiding psychological principle is expectation. And that's very important, because only if you can expect, you are ethically, it is ethically okay or acceptable to kill people. So revolution means killing people. In a Marxian sense, for this purpose, you can do it. It's ethically okay. And the inverse, it can only be okay if you are really sure that you reach the goal. So make revolution only if you are totally sure, if you have well calculated that this can be done. Now, they did it. You know, that this was written 200 years ago, and in the meantime, they tried it. and they made revolution. They killed quite a lot of people. And do we have paradise on earth? Everybody who listens is living in paradise. Is this correct? Or maybe not?
No.
No, at least one not. Okay. So yeah, we are two already, because I don't also don't live in paradise. So something in this expectation thing must be wrong. And that's why finally the classical Marxist-Leninist system broke down, because what they just had to admit, you cannot calculate human dynamics, societal dynamics for sure. And therefore, the measures that you take are very doubtful, if not criminal. Yeah, so that's the problem here. Still, I mean, we can say, okay, so we don't kill people if we don't, if we are not that sure. But what we find in the 21st century, when Marx became very unpopular, what you find is in reality, in this neoliberal planning system of most nation states in the world, quite a lot of Marxist elements. They don't say it anymore. But if you look at the plans, the way how they plan, how they expect, and they do the same things, maybe they don't make revolutions in the old-fashioned Marxian sense anymore, but look at, for example, expropriation of farmers wherever, probably also in your countries. You can go wherever you want. Yeah, for the sake of the national progress, so the growth of the national economy, and so on. Yeah. So where you had subsistence some decades ago, you have now new industrial mass cash crop production and so on. So why? How can you justify that? Well, because it's good for the nation. Yeah, that's, I would say, Marx in disguise, in a liberal disguise. Yeah, they don't like that when you say that. You will not be popular, so be careful. But we are among ourselves, and we can say that. Okay, yeah, so that's the Marxian variation. So what kind of peace do you get here? And that's, I think, the same important, and especially now, since I'm talking from Central Europe, I mean, the peace movements that we had here in Central Europe were pretty Marxist, many of them. So question, what kind of peace were we fighting for? Yeah. No answer from my side. I'll leave it to you. Yeah, I see a hand.
Yeah, there's some questions. I can maybe, if you like, I can read them for you. So, Abdul Ghani, I think it would be more beneficial if they select the positive features of each from one comprehensive system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other one is by Khalid Bigas. How does the idea of freedom of the market in Adam Smith achieve the issue of building world peace? Or is the issue of peace limited to local peace only? So this is from...
The second one I cannot see. Yeah,
I think you see that private.
Okay, so private for you. Okay.
No, it's for you, but he sent it maybe by mistake.
Then repeat, please, your private message.
Okay, I will. How does the idea of freedom of the market in Adam Smith achieve the issue of building world peace? And is the issue of peace limited to local peace only?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the Smithian goes together with the Kantian, so that's one family, and Ricardo. And what you get here is, of course, the statement how the world peace can be achieved. This is what all of them share. Yeah, none of them says it's just local, it's just for me or just for my people. It is always a global attempt. And well, what happened with Adam Smith in basically was that with this belief, and which became very strong politically, I mean, they did in the 19th century what Smith said. So open door policy means that everybody can make trade everywhere. But who is everybody? Did this mean that let's say African folks could access freely the harbor of Amsterdam and I don't know what London? Of course not, because they were not able to go there, but it was the inverse. So this agreement was among the European powers, and the open door was the open door most of all to Africa. So that means all the Europeans could colonize everywhere in Africa and extract the natural resources of all kinds, including the labor force of the continent from there in order to grow themselves. So in this regard, it worked. The richness of the European countries, and especially those who did most of this sort of imperialism and colonialism, like Great Britain, France, Belgium, this is a norm. Yeah, they progressed enormously, but the ones who paid the bill were down in Africa. Not only, but well, we can also talk about India and so on. So wherever you want to go, yeah, well, you know very well where they have been. So it works, yes, but it has a price. And you can say that the European nations were rather peaceful in the Smithian sense by not shooting with their cannons at each other. So you don't have the trade ships from England did not shoot on the trade ships from France. And they went the same routes because they exploited the same people. So that's the effect of the Smithian thing, because you can go everywhere. The old fashion, so to say, was that everybody has his or its own colony and protects the colony. But do you see the difference? This is very expensive. If you have a national colony that you say, well, like what the French did quite a lot, so this is now our territory, you have to spend fortunes in order to defend that away from the center. Whereas you say, okay, that's open. And what we saw in the 20th century when the countries became independent, of course, the ones who pay the bill for that are again the people in Africa. And that's the reason why we have this misery down there and why we have so rich states here in Europe. So behind the Smithian and Ricardian sense, what you get, I think here we can go with Marx, is you get more and more disequality. Yeah, so you get more and more unbalanced structures of income, and you get concentration of capital in certain places. And in history, we know that these places were very often geographically in Europe. Yeah, and the ones who paid the bill were on the other side. So that's, I think, in that sense, I would rather go with Marx than with Smith or with Ricardo. But still, we have this problem in the Marxian philosophy, or let's say in the psychological condition of Marxists, that is this expectation thing that makes them violent. So I did not say that I am a Marxist. I just say in the analysis, I think that we can rather go with well, the historic evidence tells us that Marx was rather right than Smith. But the belief sentences are still there. I mean, Adam Smith is still very popular in European universities. You have to teach to learn him and read him if you study economic history or things like that.
Yeah, there's another question, Professor.
Yeah.
Karl Marx is from Jena. He studied here at Friedrich Schiller. So just to add this to the comment.
What Karl Marx is for you? What?
A comment that Karl Marx was here. We have a
Yeah, of course. Yeah, okay, yeah.
A lot of Marxists in Jena.
Yeah.
God knows where they are. So here's another question.
And you are at the Friedrich Schiller University. That excuses you.
Yeah, we have a saying here that our father doctor is Karl Marx.
Okay.
So here's does European philosophy heritage is generalizable? Meaning, can we use the same analytical level in all cases using the European philosophy?
No, but we are not there yet. This is also, therefore, I'm sorry that I didn't answer the other question that I have seen before, because I mean, this targets already our concluding point. Yeah. So of course we have to take them together. So I just go step by step through them for showing the stronger sides, the what works and what maybe not on, and most of all the psychological condition that is very important for peace workers. Because if you do applied peace work, you have to be able to read the psychological condition of your party. So it doesn't make sense to discuss expectation with a fear-driven person. And if this person is a political leader, you will need a different strategy in order to negotiate than you would do with somebody who expects. Yeah, so that's, and we are not through, we still have a fourth. Let me see the time. Okay, yeah, so we will do the fourth one. This is, I think, almost 30% of what I wanted to do. Yeah, so then let's finish at least this part. I think that's important. Again, doesn't work here. Yeah. So then the last gentleman that you remember was Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He's also famous for a philosophy in one sentence. I guess that most of you know, back to nature. That's what I have learned I think in secondary school. And I learned the name and this sentence. Nobody understood. We were thinking of, he means that we should jump on trees and throw bananas. Of course, somebody's throwing bananas. Okay. Yeah, so, but of course, this is not what it means, but very important. So he was the first one who started to criticize the Cartesian principles. And this had a lot of effect. So the modern separation of nature and culture, you know, in this modern understanding, culture is the activity of the mind, of the human mind, and therefore noble. Nature is like the body, is the resource that is available for cultural doing, and therefore minor. This is in the Cartesian sense, you always have this separation. The same with body and mind, we discussed, object and subject. Is says Rousseau, an epistemological error. He was again impressed by things that he saw, because you see, he lived in the time of the early industrial revolution, and he saw the consequence of Cartesian reductionism. And therefore he tried to think differently. Now this consequence, back to nature, means not let's jump on trees and throw bananas, but it means skepticism towards progress, civilization, and culture. So at that time, revolutionary question, what if we, these super intelligent, brilliant human beings, are not only culture, but also nature? What if our body as aspect of nature is not separated from the mind? So what if mind is a body function? Which we know today that's true. Yeah. So what if you cannot separate the object from the perceiving subject? This is a revolutionary proposal for the enthusiast belief in modern progress. And that's what begins with Jean-Jacques Rousseau, not too explicit already in his early writings, but then later it was taken over and then it became very clear. So now the point is, the psychological principle is doubt. Of course, I mean, we already have heard that this doubt principle was there in Descartes, so this was a topic for Rousseau, but in Rousseau you see the incarnation, so to say, of doubt as a philosophical, psychological principle. So people, let's doubt. Whenever somebody comes up with a truth, let's doubt. Yeah, that's different to I expect, I calculate, and the world is a mathematical calculation, and I get a result, and I do that. And I can justify whatever I do because I have a result. This is different to people that sit down and find a rational solution. that's different of I'm so afraid of you. So this is a new quality that came in and gradually grew through the 19th century, and then culminated in the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, who turned a lot of things around. So what is relevant? I mean, Nietzsche wrote many things. By the way, I just a few days ago I was in Sils Maria, where he wrote most of his works in Switzerland. So what is important for us here in this context is that the cognition of the world and the human self is not only carried out by reason, but by narrative that tells stories, by images that transgress the limit of the rational notion. I know that that's a horrible sentence, and reading Nietzsche is always horrible. It's you have to suffer if you want to read Nietzsche, but it is worth to give it a try. So he speaks about the cognition of the world and the human self. Here we have different keywords. What is the world? And what is cognition? So he does not say condition, but he says cognition. This will be very important probably next time we meet, if you come back, if you dare to come back. So then we have here the key word of the self. Remember, I told you already that Nietzsche was the one who said there is no doer behind the deed. So in the real world, there are deeds, but different to all our traditional beliefs, there is not a responsible individual doing a deed, but the deeds result always from relations. So whatever we do is never produced by one, but always in relation, in interaction with the others. Yeah, so that's was a scandalous new thing, because it undermines totally the idea of the self in the sense of a Christian or Muslim soul. Yeah, because if we always do this together and in relation, so you cannot make somebody responsible for an individual deed, because there is no doer. Yeah, this goes against a lot of principles that were clearly in the mainstream at that time and still are today. So, and then he goes even further, that he says is not only carried out by reason. So for Kantians, a real scandalous statement. That means he agrees, Nietzsche agrees that we are rational beings, but he says this is not enough. There is a narrative that tells stories by images, and these images are nourished by contents that transgress the limit of rational notion. I suppose that I lost you all. I try to get you back, but a simple question: are you your mind? And I hope that you will agree with me that no, you have a mind, but you are not a mind. That's great. And now the question is, what else do you have? On human properties, human characteristics. And now we get certainly things in that might be confusing, but very important for peace researchers. So for example, sorry that I have to bother you with this topic. For example, you are sexual beings. However you perform in reality as a sexual being, the sexual drive is there. You are born and therefore you are a sexual being. And the sexual drive will accompany you until you die. Now the question is the sexual drive relevant for your relations to others? That means in an encounter with whomever, does sexuality play a role? I don't talk about your partner or whatever, romantic thing. No, I just say in everyday situation, you meet somebody. Does your and the other person's sexuality come in and influence the relation? Probably yes. Yeah, whatever you do, and if you decide I don't do anything and I just ignore it, then it's also there. So that means that this pretending not to have it, not to be driven by it, is also executing it. So that means you cannot be no sexual being, and the sexuality constantly influences all our encounters. And now the Nietzschean question is, and is that rational? Well, I don't know. Well, you are all well hidden. I don't see you. So you can just answer with yourself. And of course, you know, all of you will agree that no, that's not rational at all. I mean, that's exactly the characteristic of sexuality. It's not rational. You can control your behavior, but you cannot control the sexuality as such. So the sexual drive is just there and thus, and it has an influence on relations. And maybe now I can continue again, observing yourself. Is your sexual performance in real life always rational? And again, I would say, well, you try to say yes and to go according to certain standards, but very often you fail. Why? Because it's very strong and irrational. And now the bad news is, I just gave you one example. There are more. So what about emotions? Yeah. If I tell you now in a Kantian sense, please don't be so emotional, as I'm sure you like this sentence. So please don't be so emotional, please be rational. Does this help in a relation? Yeah, no, probably not. The point here is what the sentence says is emotions are disturbing very often. I mean, there are also positive emotions, but still the point is that these emotions have a strong impact on our actual relations, and the emotions per se are not rational. So if I'm afraid, if I fear, if I feel hatred, if whatever, even if I fall in love, is that rational? Yeah, also for saying, or if I find affection to somebody, is this rational? No. So these are a lot of human properties that are not rational. I can continue with mentality, all the movies that we have in our head. Yeah. So the stories that we are telling ourselves about reality, and that are not there. Yeah. If it was a real class, what I'm doing, I scare my students usually with photos of snakes and tigers. So in this moment, you are now on the safe side. I cannot do it, but I would suddenly have a picture, a photo of a snake and like an attacking cobra or something in front of you. And usually it works that the students who is sitting there, and I surprise him or her with this photo, that, ah! Yeah. And I said, well, what happened? Ah, snake. I said, where's the snake? Yeah, well, this is just a piece of paper with some colored dots on it, and you get scared as if it was a snake. So why? Because we have this movie maker in our mind that gives us and alerts us immediately in such a moment. So, and we can continue. Then we have this very complex question of spirituality. We all, the human beings, are equipped with the potential to spiritual experiences. Some of us ignore it, some of us don't refine it, but the potential we all have, and many of us do these experiences. Are they rational? Well, again, same story. If you try to make that rational, you are not spiritual anymore. This excludes each other. You can talk rationally about sexuality, about emotions, about mentality, about spirituality, but the thing itself is not rational. And this is what Nietzsche found out, and why he then proposed to analyze more the narrative, the storytelling effect that works usually with symbols, with images that engage our mind. So, and this is now a scandal, and still Nietzsche still is very, very unpopular, especially in Germany, Ayat, am I right? Maybe not even in Jena, he's welcome. Yeah. Yeah, I had once a wonderful discussion with a German political scientist who got very emotional in our discussion, and he didn't like my arguments at all. And at a certain point, he said, "You know what you are doing, Professor Dietrich? You bring Nietzsche back to Germany through the back door." Yeah, okay. He's still in the 21st century proud that the Germans kicked him out of their country, and he's afraid that he comes back. So just what I want to say is there are no objective facts according to Nietzsche, but only interpretations. Does this do something with us in peace studies? This shatters the principles, the fundament of social science. And if you go into applied peace work, you see that this guy has quite a point. You don't get very far in peace work, in applied peace work, with objective facts. The parties who are in troubles, who are emotional, and it's somewhere in this not rational human sphere, they are not too interested in objective facts. You will not mediate well if you tell them what the truth is. But there are always interpretations. So our work and preparing peace workers means we have to be trained as interpreters, because our material are interpretations. So, and from that comes the principle of perspective. Oh, I'm already very late. I'm sorry. And nobody stops me. Let me just finish the slide and I'm done in a few seconds.
You have time, Professor. We'll finish in 10 minutes, I guess. 6:15 will be a good time.
So we have time. It's not that, okay.
It's at 5 because we missed some time when people came in. So we added them 15 minutes extra.
You are serious. Okay, good. Now, well, after this, with this slide we end, but let me just, because there are some points that are maybe interesting and important now for the academic discourse, and especially for academic paper writing. That means goes from a PhD dissertation to a simple seminar or course paper. If we follow Nietzsche here, and I do it, then we have to get the principle of perspective into academic writing. Because different to Descartes, we don't think that there is objectivity in science. We think that whatever academic statement I make, it depends on the perspective from where I analyze and from where I talk and from where I write. Therefore, what we are doing with our students in our program is that we make them beginning their papers really with a personal perspective. So the difference to mainstream here is very often that we tell them, you are allowed to use the I form in your writing. I mean, when I was a young student, my professor in history told me, if you write, I believe that, or I found out, I think, or something like that, that's not academic. And this was created and you were corrected and you were downgraded. So from our point of view, this is now very different, because we think that the reader has to be able to follow the process of cognition of the writer. And therefore, in order to produce an authentic academic paper, first of all, you have to introduce yourself. And of course, not with a whole life story. I mean, if you are, I don't know, some decades old, this would be just a library for it by itself. But you have to tell the reader what the key aspects of your own personality in relation to the topic and to the research interests are. So this can be short. In papers like in our master thesis, we tell the students maybe 5 to 10 pages. In these 5 to 10 pages, I want to know who the writer is, what is, and in this, according to the principle of selective authenticity, I don't want to know whatever private story of the reader, but what is of the writer, but what is relevant regarding the topic and the research interest. Where does the research interest come from? This is the second step. Why does this writer want to know what the thesis, what the research question is? So this shouldn't come out of the blue, but it comes from the experience, from the interest of this person. And then I can follow. And from that, I derive the method. And from that, I present also the state of the art, because nowadays in the times of internet, nobody knows all the literature about whatever question you choose. Yeah, nobody can read that. So that's a very important thing that we owe to Friedrich Nietzsche. I'm very happy that he did that for us, and of course the philosophy of the 20th century followed and prepared that well. And for me, it is a very important point in the working principles of peace studies.
Thank you.
Yeah, and of course the psychological principle, you see that the color is green, so therefore it is again doubt. Nietzsche comes almost a century after Rousseau, and he refined a lot. He took some of these ideas of Rousseau, he made it much more explicit, and most of all because of his extremely powerful language, he brought it into a form that stands like a rock until today, I would say. It is really challenging, it's super hard, but it's worth to study it. Yeah, so this is where I could finish. Yeah, this is a good point to finish. My concern now is that, I don't know what number of the slide is, I can have a look. Fun? Yeah, it's slide 16 out of 34, so it's almost half of what I wanted to present. Maybe we will, I'm not sure, is this interesting for you, and shall we continue with that next time? Or shall I prepare something, well, what I initially prepared, different?
I think it's good. I think it's very good to understand the philosophy of peace and reconciliation and how it started all together. So it kind of built some basis for researchers to understand, history of philosophy. Usually we say we apply philosophy into theories to develop new theories. So I think it's very important, Professor. So that's my
okay.
point.
So if you want it, then we continue just next time. But I would like democratically, in a Kantian sense, I would like to ask the participants who comes back if we do that. And since I cannot see you, I'll probably have to see that.
Yeah, for me, it's very interesting, and it's a foundation. We are learning the foundation of the peace, so from philosophical perspective. So for me, I like to continue next week, and it would be appreciated if we can get a copy of this presentation.
Yeah, you can get it. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Okay. Is this the opinion of the majority? Yeah. Well, I don't see so many, but maybe Ayat, if you see them, or
Yeah, I see them, but you need to stop the sharing, then you can see them all.
Okay, I stop sharing.
We can see each other, then we can discuss for 2 minutes the whole discussion, or maybe I try to.
Now it should be changed.
Not yet.
Not yet.
No.
So maybe I have to get out.
Maybe I stop. No, I stop you. I'll stop you. Okay.
Yeah, now it's okay.
Now we see everyone, I guess.
Okay.
So we can discuss for 2 minutes exactly what do you think about the session today, and if we can go and continue with the philosophy of reconciliation and peace studies for the next session. This is what Professor Wolfgang, and maybe you can give us some little bit feedback if that's possible. Anyone can raise his hand and speak whatever he thinks. We can brainstorm. If you have any ideas or feedback that you would like to say before we end the session as a conclusion of what we are doing. So Abdul Ghani, if you have anything you can say, or this is a thumbs up, I guess. You need to unmute yourself.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much, Professor, for the interesting. I'm so sorry because I have some noise outside. Thank you so much for this such interesting session. I think it helps all disciplines. So if we can go on knowing about this history, it would be okay. It helps me so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abdul Ghani. Any other comments or feedback you would like to share with us on the session before we end it? So I see there's until no hands up or anyone would like to share. What do you think, Professor? Do you have any other conclusions at the end? You're still muted.
Yes. Yeah, okay, so it sounds like an agreement that we don't well, chase people away. then we continue with this one next time, and I will rearrange a little bit for the following sessions, and I think we will have time to do it all. Yeah, I mean, that's so. Next time, then we will run through the 20th century, and getting closer to the foundation of the discipline as such. So I will mix always a little bit of philosophy with just the historic development of the discipline. I think that will be enough for next time.
I think it's a good, it's excellent idea, Professor. It's
Okay.
the idea that we base our research on philosophy, and they get some little bit of philosophy so that they can base the research on it. Maybe they can find something that they can, input in their, like, this I learned in Harvard, by the way, that everything starts with philosophy.
Yes, that's
In
true.
computer science, where we're studying AI, and the professor just came in, it's philosophy for
Yeah.
everything. So
Yeah,
yes,
that's true.
yeah, Rawan has something to say before we close. So Rawan, maybe you can speak.
Yes, so thank you very much, Professor Dietrich. I hope I pronounce your last name correctly. Okay, thank you. So my question would be, do you want us to do any readings for next time? So this is really helpful, but do you want us to come prepared with some readings, or do you prefer just to give us some information?
I'm not sure whether this is part of the format. I was not asked to prepare readings. But I had what maybe you answer this, because you are in the organizational team.
So the readings are on the website of the program. You have about 20 books. You can check them and you can download them. There are ones like there's a website where you can download most of the books. Actually, there's a lot of them, and on the section of the website on the PhD program, and then you go to the reconciliation peace studies, and then they have a lot of books that you can check them. But there's not like specific for those program that we are doing right now, because this is a transdisciplinary program with many aspects and different professors as well. So there's no just one book for the whole program.
Okay, so what just comes to my mind, I'm not sure, I'm sorry that I didn't check that. I mean, most of the things that I'm presenting here are from volume 1 of my trilogy on many pieces. And the English version is only available from the publishing house, and it's pretty expensive. But there should be, and I think that could help most of the people here, free access to the Arabic translation. But do you have the link? I'm not sure. If not, I can ask my colleagues in Iraq to send me.
Oh, that would be good, Professor. No, we don't have the link. If you can share
Yeah.
the link, and we can share it with the students for the next session, it will be very good.
Yeah, okay, so then I will try to get it, or maybe I even have it, and then I send it to you, and maybe you send it to the people, and they can read whenever they want. That's even free access, so
that's
cheap and easy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you will send me, and I will, if you like, I can
Yes.
also publish it if you want on the website. But I think it's better to send it here when people attend. And
Yes.
that would be, or we send it to the list of registered people, because we have your email now since you're registered as well.
Okay.
So good to have you. So Zinat has one question, I guess. Zinat, you can ask.
Yeah, if Dr. Dietrich can send the main concepts of the next presentation, so we can be prepared. Whoever wants to search and learn can do. Only outline the main concepts of the next class by email.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I can do that, but it is a little bit. It's tricky because you see, I mean, I did now half of what I wanted to do. So, yeah, you have to take it with a Nietzschean attitude, and not with a Marxian. Yeah, so don't expect, but doubt that it will be true. Yeah. Now, yes, I can send you. I would say how are we going to do that? I can send Ayat the presentation that I have currently, and if you want, you can see the next slides to come. They are pretty complex anyway, even as slides they are. Yeah, so I mean, you will need some comments. I don't think that you fall asleep if I speak, because you have seen it before. So shall we do that? Where are we going to, or how are we going to share the slides?
As you wish, Professor. The way you want to send that before the lecture is also good. By me, I can send it to all the participants and they can read it before, get an overview, and then
Okay.
they can come prepared with questions, and then they will be more
Yeah.
actively in the sessions, I guess.
Okay, so I send it to you by a Dropbox, and you may publish it for the internal public.
That would be very nice.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, we will do that. I think it's also good.
Yeah,
So,
good.
any other question? Abdelghani has one question, so we can answer Abdelghani, and then I think we will be off.
I'm so sorry, but I know the time is over. But I have some comments. Can I talk about them next time concerning this this session?
Yes.
Yes, no problem. So we'll continue the session. This will be continued for the second session as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So by that, I would like to close the session, and I thank you everyone for coming to the first AARMENA program, doctoral program. And we hope we'll see you next time and to continue the session. As I said before, it's until the 14th of January. It's once a week from 3 to 6 Middle Eastern time, from 2 to 5, German time and Austrian time. So have a good day and enjoy your day. And thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
And